Hello and welcome to episode 200 of The Dive Down.
200
of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast all about 200 Magic cards for the casual spike.
Well, don't spoil it right off the top.
That's what it is, Dave. They saw it in the title.
I guess that's true. Before they downloaded, before they decided if they wanted to participate in this festival.
History in the making. My name is Stanislav, here in Atlanta, and with me on the couch is Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, my friend, welcome to 200 episodes. I don't know how we pulled this off, 200, but we did. And yeah, like you said, we are in Atlanta. We're in Greg's basement studio. It's a lovely place. We're talking into much higher quality microphones than usual.
And we can see each other's faces and eyes. The delight is unbelievable.
It's always so awkward to like actually be face to face. It's like, why can't I just be looking at a screen again? It's like, do I maintain eye contact with Dave as I'm talking to him?
Truly, I felt that way all weekend here at Dreamhack, talking with people that I normally interact with on Twitter instead of and seeing them in person, and everybody realizing once again how short I am in real life.
Yes, let me introduce the Godfather, also with us in Atlanta. It's Dave Harbarger.
Yeah, I'm here. We did it. We've been sleeping well. We've been playing Magic kind of well. We did a weird excursion yesterday where we played a sealed 10K.
Yes.
But it was fun for the first couple rounds.
Friends, don't let friends peer pressure one another into playing sealed 10Ks.
See, I just didn't. I just walked around. I enjoy Dreamhack actually a lot. We should briefly talk perhaps about Dreamhack since it's the first time that a Magic event, second time. The first time the RC is at Dreamhack.
Yes, Shane, tell us all about Dreamhack. Tell us about the cosplayers you've met.
I didn't meet any cosplayers, but I thought that was actually a cool part. A lot of high-end cosplayers. A lot of people. There's a front and center, honestly, there is a sewing display of people making like costumes and whatnot right there, like doing cosplay development. They really focused on the craft of everything, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of other games being played around, which I thought was like a really good part.
Yeah, there was some StarCraft tournaments happening yesterday, and they were creating the loudest noise in the hall. Just people losing their minds over Zergs and Bergs.
Zerg rushes, I think is what the technical term is.
Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
I'm a Protoss main myself, but there's fighting game tournaments. There's banks of CRTs for people to play like GameCube era Smash Bros. And things like that. Like it's there's just so much going on, and it brought a lot of life to the rest of the environment. So like if you were in between rounds or you weren't participating, there was always something to go do and see and observe.
And I was a little worried in advance that Magic would be sort of like the redheaded stepchild of this event, but the Magic portion is very lively and busy, and it's lit differently so that people can see their cards.
That's the funniest part to me, was walking into Dreamhack and it's like smoke machines and huge screens and StarCraft and laser beams and cosplayers. And then you get over to the Magic area and it's still, it's fluorescent lights, and it's still a Magic event, which is nice. The biggest thing for me was just, it was nice to walk around in between rounds and have something else to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, so overall, I've been really happy and impressed with Dreamhack and the tournaments around like any other Magic tournament I've been at, which means a little bit longer between rounds than you really want to, but that's every big tournament you're at.
So that's Dreamhack. Let's talk about this week's episode. It's episode 200. Those of you who've been listening for the last 100 episodes at least probably remember episode 100, we focused on 100 decks. This time, we had to up the ante somehow. So we're going to cover 200 cards, typically from a modern focus.
Only from a modern focus, really. I mean, we're going to talk about sort of the definitive 200 cards in modern across its history.
According to us.
According to us.
Next year is going to be my favorite 300 keywords.
Yeah.
Most of them come from AFR.
Yeah. And most of them are kicker variants.
Yeah, exactly. Kicker variants, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what we're going to do. We're not going to publish this list anywhere. You're just going to enjoy it. We don't want you to nitpick it, but you're going to tweet at us if we missed anything. So go ahead, fire up your tweet bots.
Before all that, let's housekeep. We're just going to talk about how to support this show for the next 100 episodes. The easiest way to do that is on Patreon, over at patreon.com/thedivedown. And thank you so much to the patron supporters who made this Atlanta trip possible for the Dive Down.
That's right. And also thanks to the ones that came to hang out with us, Aaron, Grant, Josh,
Cora.
Andy, Cora. It was great to see you all.
Are we forgetting anyone?
And I hope we're not forgetting someone, but yeah.
And it's always great to see so many, friends of the pod, so many people who came up to us and said they enjoyed the pod, or we just sat across from and they were like, "Are you Stanislav from the Dive Down?" They didn't say that to me. They said that to Stanislav.
And I always said yes.
Yeah, you're not hiding yourself anymore.
Not anymore.
Let your light shine. Don't put a basket over your light.
You can also support us through Mana Traders.
Yep, manatraders.com, our sponsor for the last easily 175 episodes, if not more. Manatraders.com, the best place to rent Magic Online cards. If you use code TheDiveDown15, we got to change that code. We're going to change it soon. You will be able to get 10% off of your first 2 months of rental cards at Mana Traders.
Yeah, I think there's a forced change at the end of the year anyway, so
Yeah.
we will have a new code.
So it will
How
be.
about the Dive Down 16?
I was thinking more 10. Maybe we would make it accurate with what the discount is.
How about the Dive Down 420?
Yeah, perfect. That's your personal code. If you want to support Stan personally,
Or if you want to hack into my email addresses, that's what I use. You can also support us by buying merch from our new merch store.
that's right.
This is at thedivedown.com/store, or just go to thedivedown.com and you'll find the store at the top navigation bar. We got hats, shirts, fanny packs, sweatshirts,
Yep.
and there's going to be more to come. We have so many design ideas. That's all we've been doing at the bars of Atlanta every night is thinking of new pithy sayings to put on t-shirts.
That's right. If you want to support us and you don't like to use Patreon, this is a great way to do it. Go check out thedivedown.com/store.
Yeah, celebrate 200 episodes with us by purchasing things from our store.
We had to roll it out in time for 200.
And then, of course, support yourself with a discount on physical Magic the Gathering cards over at Nerd Rage Gaming with promo code DIVE8. Get 8% off any order of Magic cards. I've been using the DIVE8 promo code, guys.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
It works.
Perfect.
Norm will be so pleased. It works. So, should we dive into it? Should we dive into 200 cards? Anybody have anything to say? Any famous last words?
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to approach this.
Okay.
I think we know,
Unscientifically.
yes, unscientifically, this is a subjective list. We know we're going to miss some things. These are not the 200 best cards of all time. There's 200 very, very important cards to Modern's history.
You guys ever see that movie High Fidelity?
Yeah,
you know High
sure.
Fidelity? Remember when he reorganizes his record collection autobiographically?
Yes.
That's what this is. This is us reorganizing Modern autobiographically.
So we have categories that will make sense once we get into them. We're kind of approaching things in a, somewhat random order of category. There's going to be some things that we don't get into super deeply because it's 200 cards. So bear with us. You're on this ride with us, and we appreciate you having been on this ride for 199 episodes before.
Yeah. So if we're going to start,
Yeah.
what is the first thing that you think defines Modern as a format when it comes to Magic the Gathering cards?
Probably the fetch lands. I was going to try to say something funny, but instead I just went straight for the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say supplementary products.
Supplementary. Thanks. It's MH. We're here to finally decide that it's MH2 block constructed is what this is. No. Yes. It's the lands. It's not just the fetch lands.
Yeah, I was going to say overall just the mana bases of Modern, which are, historically for a long time have just been like the fetch lands and the shocks, especially with cons. I did not experience this change because I started playing in cons, but I know that it added all of the old Onslaught fetch lands into the format as well. So it went from a 5 fetch land format to a 10 fetch land format. And then, of course, we had all the shocks from Ravnica. And that was just kind of the foundation of allowing good mana in Modern.
Did you, Dave, play with the 5 fetch format?
I did.
What was that like?
I mean, it was just slightly more difficult to have solid mana bases in allied colors, but it wasn't really that hard. I mean, this was an era where, Jeskai would be what people were playing in control. So you would have your Scalding Tarns and your Arid Maces still. You just wouldn't have Floodstrand. Right. And so it functionally, it doesn't make that big of a difference. I think it does for decks that don't want to get quite as tricky and don't want to splash into 3 colors as much. But yeah, it was definitely a defining moment, and especially when you were kind of wanting to do things that only wanted to get mountains. Mm-hmm. For example, if you just wanted to fill your deck with fetch lands that got mountains, it was harder to do because there was only 2 of them.
Yeah. And in this current era, we would be amiss not to mention the triomes.
Yes.
As a new defining characteristic of the format in creating these 3+ soupy color combinations possible.
Yeah.
And sort of effortless.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with the addition of powerful domain cards, especially powerful domain removal, like Leyline Binding is just such a strong incentive to push into 4 and 5 color mana bases that the existence of the triomes is really what allows that in a somewhat straightforward fashion. And so, like, these kind of concepts exist synergistically in our eternal formats where we have fetch lands, triomes, and then things that are taking advantage of that in serious ways.
Now, before we depart from this land section, can we go on the record? Triomes, yay or nay?
I mean, I think they were kind of a bad thing. Honestly, at this point, I think it is what it is. They decided they wanted to make them for formats. They're really important to Pioneer and certainly fun for Standard when those formats exist. But I think overall, it's made a bit more soupiness out of the format. Shane, what do you think?
I mean, you've heard my take on triomes. Like, I agree. I think overall, it's like you can't put the genie back in the bottle, but you can hang out with the genie once he's here, type thing. Importantly, also, I want you to know we're not cheating, and these are not 30 cards or 25 cards. It's 30 now. Yeah, these are 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so we've got 197 to go. So we probably should.
Well, I do want to say one thing. We didn't really touch on the other stuff that fetch lands do that really warp the format in a lot of ways.
Thin your deck?
They thin your, yeah, perfect. Deck thinning. See my Reddit post on that. Yeah, they let you manipulate your deck. They let you shuffle kind of whenever you want to. They can be abused with things like reminisce, revolt triggers.
They make Death Shadows bigger, sometimes at instant speed.
Right. So the fetch lands really are probably the defining thing of the format itself.
They fuel graveyard effects like Delve.
Yeah, and Delirium.
Yeah.
They create lots of discourse within the Storm community on whether or not you should play them to make your Serum Visions better or not.
Right. The Storm community. Who's left in the Storm community? Last person out of the Storm community, turn the lights out, please.
All right. That's the foundation of Modern.
Yeah.
These 3 iconic land types. Let's just dive right into the worst parts of Modern in a little section we like to call I'm Living in a Living Nightmare.
And we have to start with the card that makes all these other lands a lot worse, and that's Blood Moon.
Blood Moon.
Blood Moon.
One of my favorite cards.
It is one of your favorite cards. It's one of my accepted cards. And Shane never plays Blood Moon, really.
No, I mean, I love Blood Moon.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Blood Moon. It's one of those cards where it's like, it's perfectly balanced in a lot of ways because, like, sometimes it's a pain in the butt to use, and sometimes they can play around it, and sometimes it's not useful at all. Sometimes you draw it too late and you want to get it out of your hand. I think it's an overall good effect and like a good check on Modern. And honestly, I feel like it's underutilized because of all the reasons I said earlier, where it's like not always great.
Yeah. It's an important valve on the format though, right? And interestingly, it's one of those cards that always feels like an anomaly because it's one of the cards that was voted into 8th edition. And so by default, it turned out that it was in Modern because that's where they drew the line for Modern.
I sort of think that they would have reprinted it into a set to make sure it ended up in Modern eventually because of how critical it is to keeping things in line.
Yeah. Well, we'll never know, right? Because it's always been there.
Yeah.
I mean, I always sort of was annoyed with this card because I remember playing against this card when it was in the dark and when I had dual lands is what I was playing with. And guess what? It makes your dual lands mountains too, and that's no fun.
Here's to finally figuring out how to not Blood Moon myself out of games between now and episode 300.
Yeah.
All right, up next on this list, we have Chalice of the Void, powerful both in Eldrazi Tron, control decks. It's a good, useful check against things like Cascade. Chalice of the Void has been one of those cards that's just been around since the entire time I've been playing Modern. It's always going to be useful because nothing else does anything like it does.
Yeah.
Chalice of the Void is the reason why I will never sell my Shattering Sprees. Because they'll always just come in handy to put copies on the stack to get rid of that thing.
Yeah. And then 2 other cards that are similarly annoying in this I'm Living in a Living Nightmare, which is basically prison components is what we put for this. Ensnaring Bridge and Lantern of Insight. You see Ensnaring Bridge in different places. Sometimes somebody gets wild and puts it in a burn sideboard or something like that. Well, that kind of stuff doesn't really happen anymore. It gets in your kind of Karn decks to be able to keep you from getting attacked. But really, it goes hand in hand with other lock pieces like Blood Moon, Chalice of the Void to make really annoying games where you can't do anything.
Yeah, and you notice like all the stuff on this list are very specialized tech pieces that no other card does really anything like them. I mean, I guess you could say like what Ghostly Prison is kind of an Ensnaring Bridge effect, but Ensnaring Bridge, these are all artifacts besides Blood Moon. We know that we'll talk more about artifacts later, but that's one of the things I really like about Modern and Magic in general is that every deck can get access to certain type of effects, and we'll talk about that as we go through the rest of this, 195, 193 left?
Let's not keep count.
Yes. We should just have a count on the right side for our own use. Right. How many we have left.
Let's just touch on briefly this last Living Nightmare card. It's Lantern of Insight. And anecdotally, my very first event that I played in Atlanta, a Modern side event, 3 rounds, my first opponent was on Lantern Control.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember you telling us that.
Screaming from the past.
Well, they had Urza Saga, so they had at least one new card.
Right.
And I got lucky that I just always drew like Brazen Borrowers, and post-board I drew my Force of Vigors so that I was never too concerned with their lock pieces. Usually it was Ensnaring Bridges, which were played main.
Yeah.
But maybe this deck will come back one day.
It's always a chance, and it's always a chance to be horrible.
Up next, we have the creatively named Stuff That's in Burn category. And so, yeah, it's not everything that's in Burn.
These are the key cards that are in Burn, but why would we talk about Burn next? Here's what I think. This is like the deck that's been around in Modern the longest, probably, of any of the things that you look at, that's still somewhat competitively viable, depending on how much Shane's going to go off right now.
No, Dave, how was Burn before Eidolon and Swiftspear?
I think it existed.
Yeah,
still.
I'm not trying to check your work. I'm just like, what do you remember?
I remember that it was a viable deck that was around still. Certainly Goblin Guide helped it. That's when I really started to pay attention. Well, Goblin Guide came out before Modern existed, so I think that it was one of the early decks that was still around just because of the power of Lightning Bolt, Lava Spike, Goblin Guide. 2011, those cards were all there.
Lightning Helix has been around.
Lightning Helix was in it.
Lava Spike's pretty old, right?
Lava Spike's from Kamigawa, so it was in it. Yeah, so there was a foundation of a red burn deck. You played different things. We were joking this morning about Shard Volley being on this list, which it's not. The cards that we have on this list are Searing Blaze, Goblin Guide, Eidolon of the Great Revel, Lightning Helix, and Lava Spike.
Yeah, and no Lightning Bolt. That's just kind of everywhere.
That's elsewhere on the list.
Oh, yes. So, I mean, I'm going to stop saying no other card does what these cards do, because that's kind of why it's on this list in the first place, or no other card does it as well as it does. But Searing Blaze is like a really important component to Burn, just simply because of it's a 2-for-1 in a Burn deck, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't get a lot of things like that. And Goblin Guide is still it's amazing to me that Goblin Guide is still so playable for how old it is. Just like a 2/2 with haste with minor downside.
I feel like a lot of times it's just barely hanging on.
Yeah.
It's like the card that is the most likely to be replaced next, I feel like, in Burn is that card, because it's just so oafy.
Well, they keep printing new Goblin Guides, and none of them are good enough.
They're not as good as this one.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that made you put lands back in your hand is just I don't know.
Wayward Guide Beast.
Yeah, we're never going to wayward this Guide Beast. But these cards are all definitive. You know what's happening when you sit down against Burn. You're likely to play against these cards. Eidolon of the Great Revel, like you said, Shane, gave this deck a huge boost, as well as just a kind of pyrostatic pillar effect. Different card, but something that would give you passive damage that would add up and would punish your opponents for getting rid of your threats. It is what it is.
Lightning Helix, not just a Burn card. We've seen it in Jeskai control decks, all kind of manner of decks. But Lightning Helix is just it's another just efficient and useful spell, a foundation of many a Modern deck or component of many a Modern deck for years. And Lava Spike, the most boring, the most straightforward card. 3 to the dome as a sorcery for 1 red mana. You can't replace it in this deck, so you've got to use it, and we've got to talk about it.
But we don't have to talk about it for very long. I think the next thing we should look at that's definitive of Modern, honestly, as a foundation of the format.
Yeah.
Cheap removal.
Yes.
1 mana efficient removal is something that you're always striving for in Modern, and there's a pretty good suite of them these days. Over the years, that's been definitive of what Modern is, though.
And on the heels of the Burn section, a good place to start is Lightning Bolt. Mm. To date, I believe still the most popular card in the format. And it always ebbs and flows, but that's just kind of this consistent truth that, if nothing else, Lightning Bolt will almost always be the most played. And in some ways, I think it's one of the things that really draws me to the format is the emotional connection between this me and this card in particular, that I think a lot of people share.
Yeah, for sure. This has been my favorite Magic card for forever.
And why do you think that is? Like, for me, it's just like the simple elegance of it encapsulating the visceral imagery of magical duels between battling wizards, right? Just shooting lightning bolts at one another.
Yeah, it's like what the theme of the game is really expressed just in this one card.
I mean, you were lightning bolt guys. I'm a healing staff guy. So,
well, really, I'm an ancestral recall guy, but we can't even talk about that one. Been chasing that dragon for 20 years.
So while Lightning Bolt really helped define sort of the nature of cheap removal in the format for a really long portion of Modern's history, the introduction of this next card, I think, sort of redefined what it means to be not only a good removal spell, but even certain playable creatures, and that was Fatal Push.
Yeah,
that was hugely redefining.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing, right? Because it was an era when Tarmogoyf was still dominant when that card came out. And this was one of the first cards in a while that could just deal with it for 1 mana, and wasn't Path to Exile.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And because, if you tried dealing with a Goyf with a Lightning Bolt, sometimes you'd say, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah. It better be a 1/2 when you did it. Yeah, exactly.
It's really hard to go back and think about the landscape that changed because of Fatal Push, because I feel like it wasn't immediate. I mean, Fatal Push, of course, was, this is a great card. I'm going to get 4 copies. It's $15 uncommon and things like that. And then I feel like slowly, like what you were saying, Stan, it's just like, oh, now my Tarmogoyfs stink a lot more. And they're slowly just continue to be pushed more and more out, not only for their creature power level.
I mean, they were a $100 card or $75 card at the time. And now you can buy a Tarmogoyf for $15, I think.
Yeesh, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to
And that's all because of Fatal Push.
Well,
and overprinting.
And other things, too.
Yeah. I mean, Fatal Push is just such a cool card because of the fact that, like, you have to enable the really powerful mode, but because it's modern, it's not always really that necessary in the first place. And so, when we see right now, Fatal Push isn't even that widely played.
That's mostly because black isn't that widely played. And there are less targets for it right now. Or the Ledger Shredder has made a huge kind of ability for that to come back, too. But
yeah, I mean, it's good. It's great to have an effect like Fatal Push around.
Yeah, I will say one of the most interesting things to me about Fatal Push is that it came out around the same time that people realized Death Shadow was a deck. And in some ways, Fatal Push kind of powered Death Shadow. But on the other hand, Death Shadow was one of the best targets for Fatal Push, as it turned out. So it was this weird kind of give and take in that whole era.
Let's talk about the white one in the room, and that's Path to Exile.
People hate this card.
Yeah, and I think because it's bad now.
Remember, it was always kind of bad, though.
People just didn't want to admit that it was kind of bad. I mean, it was what you had to have. If you weren't playing, if you wanted a 1-mana answer to Tarmogoyf every time, that was your card.
I still remember, like, the first time people started acknowledging that maybe it's not worth playing when, like, Reed Duke's like, I don't play Path to Exile in my Obzon deck.
Right.
It's like, I'm just not worth it.
Remember right before the pandemic, they said Path to Exile was going to be the full art promo for all of their tournaments of like 2020.
Yeah.
And they were beautiful. And I got a set. And then the card was never good again. All right, here's another one that redefined the format with its introduction, and that was Unholy Heat.
Yes. Why? How?
1 mana, goes big, and it hits Planeswalkers.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that it hits Planeswalkers for big. I mean, Lightning Bolt hits Planeswalkers too.
Yeah, but it's not as big.
Right, but being able to go to 6 suddenly. I remember this is a card that we did not talk about during our Modern Horizons 2 spoiler episode any more than in passing.
Yeah.
And I was, immediately after we recorded the app, I read the card again and I was like, what have we done?
6 is absurd.
It's absurd.
6 is a lot.
And Delirium is not hard to enable in Modern, as we said, because of fetch lands, because of Mishra's Bauble.
Well, I almost feel like Unholy Heat is one of the reasons why Mishra's Bauble is so prevalent in the format right now, too.
Yeah. I mean, Bauble was always good, and we'll talk about Bauble in a minute, but that, yes, that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, Bauble was always good, but now this is like a very critical reason to put Bauble into more decks, because it's a valuable, free way to put more card types in your yard for Delirium.
And then the other 1 mana black removal spell that people played for a while was Dismember.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly had its moments in different decks. I think that, still a good utility piece occasionally if you need it.
I mean, super important for certain decks that are kind of less popular right now.
I mean, this ends up in Tron sometimes,
Yeah.
right? In the sideboard, or it ends up in like a weird deck that doesn't have a way to deal with
Humans, Merfolk,
Yeah.
just all kind of stuff. Like, Dismember is just a good card to have around because it can be in anything because for X mana.
And then we have 2 white removal spells that have happened recently that really took Path to Exile out, but also took each other out a little bit anyway. And that's Leyline Binding and Prismatic Ending. Remember when Prismatic Ending was printed and everybody was like, this is amazing?
And it still is.
Yeah, it still is. But Leyline Binding is just kind of better.
Yeah, Leyline Binding just hits everything for one. Prismatic Ending asks you to put a little elbow grease in there.
Well, and it's also a sorcery, and Leyline Binding is an instant, essentially. And it's a different card type, so if you're trying to delirium stuff, if these end up in your graveyard, that's a thing. It's harder, so.
Pros and cons. Yeah, I mean, I think Leyline Binding is still so fresh. It's amazing that it made this list so quickly, but we have seen the impact on the format and how many decks are trying to contort themselves to add it. Teamer Rhinos immediately becomes a 5-color Rhinos deck by and large because people just want to use this powerful removal tool.
Blue-white control suddenly becomes a pseudo 5-color deck just so it could play this too, and occasionally even play reminisce.
I mean, I haven't seen a card make people contort in such a manner so quickly, and I think partially that's a consequence of the mana that we have and people realizing that flexing their mana bases is not that bad. And now we're, of course, a card we'll talk about later, spoiler, things like Ren and 6 being shoved in all sorts of decks, and it's just what people can do now. And a card like Leyline Binding being on this list is, we have it here because, we know it's going to be around for a while.
My hot take is that the really quick succession of additions of Prismatic Ending, Leyline Binding, and Solitude in the span of like a year and a half or less now makes white in Modern not the worst color.
Yes, exactly.
At all. And for as long as Leyline Binding I think is going to be around, like these Triomes I think are going to be a mainstay of the format as well.
Absolutely.
David,
Shane.
it's almost the holiday season. Are you aware of that?
I think I hear off in the distance sleighs and jingle bells.
What do the non-Christmas holidays sound like? Like, do they sound like dreidels spinning?
They all sound like bells of different sizes and kinds.
Beautiful. I love it. I like the consistency we have across all of our holidays. But it's episode 200, and Barrister and Man has been with us for a surprisingly long time now. They've been a huge asset, a huge, awesome partner for us to work with. And as you all know, Dave Stanislav's not here for the ad break, but the holidays are coming up. We've got a lot of people out there who are probably like, what do I buy for myself? That's what you buy for during the holidays, right?
Or my other hirsute friends.
Yes. What do I get for the bearded man in my life?
You go and hang out at the hirsute bar, right?
Yeah, what do I get for my friend out there who really likes soaps and smelling good and, shaven? I guess you could even for the non-bearded, actually. This is probably a better store suited for the non-bearded individual.
Well, it's all perspective. At any rate, if you go to barristerandman.com right now, you can check out their holiday gift guide and see what we affectionately like to call the classics from Barrister and Man. This is a masterclass in Will and team's most popular sense, most versatile sense, perhaps we could say.
Yeah.
And
Stan would agree.
these are all ones that we've used. So you got your Seville, you got your Bay Rum, you got Lavender, and you got Waves. And we've talked about these all a million times. Shane, you're a Wavesman.
Yeah, I'm a Wavesman. Love it. But yeah, if Stan was here, he'd be like, yeah, buy the lavender aftershave balm, buy the splash, buy the soap. And there's also, of course, every beard oil and every hand and body soap as well. So yeah, if you need to buy something for you and yours for the upcoming holidays, head on over to Barrister and Man, MANN.com. Use code TheDiveDown15 for 15% off your first order. And that'll let Will know that you came through us. If you're a returning customer, just send something in the comments. Just say, hey, I'm coming back from the Dive Down as well. That lets them know that you're keeping coming back because we keep talking about them. So head on over to Barrister and Man, and we appreciate it.
All right, so we are 30 minutes into this show.
Oh yeah, we got a lot.
We are 10% of the way through the cards.
We also, of course, have the intro, but yeah, this can be a faster section.
Yes, because I think we've really talked about the stuff that's the glue of the format, other than burn, right? Like,
Yes.
It's the mana, it's the cheap removal, it's the hate cards. Those are things that you're going to see all the time. Burn, we threw that in for fun. What do you want to talk about next, quickly?
Every counterspell.
Every single counterspell all at once.
Starting with Counterspell.
How excited were you when this card was printed?
Very much.
Me too.
When in beta, alpha.
I was excited then too. But having it join Lightning Bolt as my two favorite spells were available in the format that I like to play most. We had been rumored for a long time it was going to be there. I'm glad it's playable. For a long time, people were kind of like, nobody's going to want to play 2-mana counter a spell. It doesn't go in every deck. It doesn't warp the format, but it's a good card and it gets to be played, and that's great.
It'll just be in basically any control deck that can play it because they're not running Chartless Agent.
Exactly. And then how about the rest of these?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I think it's funny that we have stuff that used to be good and stuff that is good now. Where it's like, I'm looking at this list and we have Remand, we have Mana Leak, we have Spell Snare, we have Cryptic Command.
Yeah, this is for our hearts, the Blue Mage hearts that we have.
Yeah.
We understand. We don't have to go in depth about these, but a lot of these cards aren't good anymore.
Yeah.
Although I do have 2 Mana Leak in the sideboard of my Hammer deck right now, surprisingly.
No, don't do that. Cryptic Command is the one that breaks my heart the most. Remand to a certain extent too, but I had to put Cryptic Commands in my trade binder. I unsleeved them, put them in the trade binder because I felt like the sleeves were more valuable.
Than the cardboard inside them.
Exactly.
What a state.
I mean, Remand still does have utility in certain types of combo decks, right?
I mean, I played it in creativity
Yeah.
before we leaned a little harder into Fire and Ice and the 5-color build. When it was more teamer, I was playing Remand.
And I think it's defensible there and could always be a nice application for like those combo control finishers.
Yeah. But let's talk about some important 1-mana spells in here. Spell Pierce and Mystical Dispute. Super important. And Stubborn Denial is out there, not good as much anymore, but still interesting.
I mean, that defined a deck, in my opinion.
It did.
Yeah, Spell Pierce is huge right now. Like, I just keep seeing these Murktide decks play more and more of them. Sometimes they're up to 3.
Yeah. Why?
Because it hits Ren and 6.
Yeah. Because it's extremely good, and Modern is so mana efficient.
It hits so many things, but I think Ren and 6 is one of them. But we can write a list of 200 cards of things that Spell Pierce tags.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the new version of Infect having Spell Pierce for Liliana the Veil. It's just like, that's what you tagged then, and then you tag Ren and 6 now.
Yeah. Or Living End, or
Yeah.
Crashing Footfalls, or whatever. There's so many spell-based payoffs right now. And Modern, there's not a lot of extra mana floating around in Modern. You're just figuring out how to get the most utility out of everything, and that's Spell Pierce. And then, of course, we have the Modern Horizon 1 cards. We got Archmage's Charm and Force of Negation. Archmage's Charm is kind of just the new Cryptic Command a little bit. It's 1 mana cheaper. It doesn't do 2 modes, but it does draw 2 cards. It does that weird control magic thing. That's good. And then Force of Negation was a necessary and important and interesting safety valve on the format, I think.
Interesting that that's become a little bit more surgical in its applications as well. You're not seeing Force so often in control decks unless they're decks that are trying to cheat on mana through Cascade, where the fact that Force is 3 mana, I think, is one of the best things about it. Obviously, you can cast it for free. That's pretty good too.
I'm surprised how much I actually like Force of Negation, because it's just like, not only is it like a safety valve, but it's also something that feels fair even though it's free. Like, I mean, I like casting it in Rhinos, whereas I do not think I'd like casting traditional Counterspell because I have to hold up mana. Who wants to pay mana for spells, Stan?
Not Stan.
No, not at all. But yeah, that's every Counterspell.
Speaking of not paying mana for spells, should we go on to the free spells of Modern?
I mean, that's another foundational element now.
I'm going to move something in our spreadsheet in real time. Listeners going to enjoy this music. Free-ish spells, yeah, and mostly led by Phyrexian Mana, which was a huge mistake in some ways, but at least that's mostly cleaned up right now because the spells that are left aren't very powerful.
Yes, and here you're referring to Gataxian Probe, Gutshot.
That's it from those.
It,
yeah. Well, the other ones are gone. Mental Misstep never kind of was around for very long. And we just talked about Dismember.
Probe was a card I never got to put in any decks. That's before my entry into Modern.
You would have loved it.
Oh,
I bet I would have.
It was so good.
I'm sure.
Prowess with Probe would have been amazing. That was something that never happened. Shane got to play it in Infect.
Yeah. It's another one of those cards where you're like, why wasn't every deck running this card? It's like you got to the point where it's like, this was one of the examples of the evolution of Magic thinking to me, is that people realize that having like a really cheap spell, cheating on mana, just having a piece of cardboard that did something that could populate a graveyard. Of course, we have more synergies with that now, but just the fact that you had that power for nothing, and then we started seeing that with stuff like Mishra's Bauble and even Gutshot in certain types of decks. And I think if Gitaxian Probe was legal now, it would be like the most bannable card in Modern.
And that's why we should try it out just for a little while. Remember Once Upon a Time?
Oh, I love playing that card so much. I knew it was going to be banned the whole time, and I just tried to play it as much as I could. I remember the deck that I had right before COVID basically was 4-color Shadow with Oko and Once Upon a Time. And maybe 6 months went by in 2020 before I touched my paper cards. And when I opened a box, that was still sitting there.
Was that card legal for under a year? Was it that good?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was legal for 4 months or something, 5 months. Something.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Wow, really?
It was legal from October to March, I guess. It was banned. Look, we played that event at Pastimes.
In March?
In March, and it was banned shortly after that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Sad.
Good card. And then a few other cards that were free-ish and also good.
And one that was banned.
Yeah. Mishra's Bauble, we talked about. That's part of the glue of the format. It's used very much. Manamorphose used to be something that was used in a lot of different decks, especially in the Prowess or Phoenix era. Not a card that's around much right now, but very easily could become something that you want to use again. Look at a card like if Third Path Iconoclast becomes something in Modern, it's possible that you're going back to being a Manamorph deck as a way to just make mana, draw extra cards, and make tokens.
These cards, Manamorphose, Cryptic Command, even Remand, cards that used to be Modern playable that are no longer at the par level of the format, that's the kind of stuff I'd love to see enter into Pioneer to find a new home for, because they're beloved.
I mean, I love when you say that about Cryptic Command. I think it's okay for Cryptic Command. Manamorphose is a card that does not need to go into any other format because it's just a piece of cardboard that says free, draw a card on it, and we don't need that stuff in Pioneer, I don't think.
Right, but Third Path Iconoclast will never be Modern playable. It might sniff Pioneer, and it's stuff like this, I think, that can help make those like fun little token generators actually applicable.
It's worth saying that I think that Third Path Iconoclast got a Modern Challenge top 8. I think I saw that on the way in this morning.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say I do not agree with Stan's take.
Okay.
Yeah, on that one.
Not endorsed.
Yeah, don't endorse that. Mishra's Bauble. None of those cards need to be over there.
I didn't say Bauble. I said Remand and Manamorphose and Cryptic.
We do have 2 free-ish creatures left on this list. We have Simian Spirit Guide, which did something eventually so obviously broken that it turned a piece of cardboard into a piece of mana.
I mean, everybody knew that was broken all the time. It was just, is it broken in a way that's okay for Modern?
Yeah.
And I think we finally decided that it wasn't, and people are still sad about it because it made their non-interactive combo decks worse, especially ad nauseam, but here we are.
Yeah, effectively killed a few archetypes, like prison, like red prison decks effectively really relied on Simian Spirit Guide to have a chance to really compete. And ad nauseam,
Neoform.
Like Neoform.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and I'm fine losing these decks. I'm fine losing like weird Cascade, Tybalt's Trickery type stuff. Anything that, we got rid of free mana for a reason.
Makes me wonder whether Simian Spirit Guide would have seen play in the Cascade decks so that you can play Violent Outburst a turn sooner.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
Very much could have.
And then finally on this list, we have Street Wraith, another card in Modern that has just been in a bunch of decks because it does something that no other card does. You pay 2 life, you pitch it in your graveyard, and you get a card back out of it. So it's been in decks that need you to lose life. It's been in decks that want to put a creature in their graveyard. It's just done a lot of weird things over the years, and it also can be cast for 5 and have Swamp Walk.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of these cards are on my personal short list of cards that are broken and potentially bannable as utility cards. When you think about why Gitaxian Probe was banned, I think there's always a chance that Mishra's Bauble could be banned for a similar reason, that someday Manamorphose could be banned for a similar reason, and Street Wraith as well. So still on my watch list, even when they're not in super powerful archetypes right now.
So Street Wraith draws a card. You know what else draws a card? Cards that say draw a card.
Yeah. So in our category of look, I'm drawing cards, we have a whole bunch of Modern's good cantrips. Not all of them blue.
Yes, and not all of them good.
Anymore.
Yeah. Well, let's start with Opt.
Right.
Good.
So Opt, Opt is interesting because it's an old card that was only brought into Modern when it was printed into Ixalan.
Yes.
And is it good?
It was so when it was printed into Modern, Izzet Storm was one of the tier 1 decks, and that was a huge upgrade for that deck.
I mean, you also played it in Prowess at the time, and that was the deck.
Eventually got into Prowess when that became more of a consistent archetype too.
Stormwing Frenemy. Thanks,
Yeah.
Stormwing Enemy.
Yeah.
So-
Bright Dragon.
Yeah. Hand in hand with that, Consider. Those are the cards that people play now. Consider.
Right,
and
right.
Opt.
I don't think Opt even sees that much play because of Consider.
Right.
Because Consider sort of like solved all the problems that other cantrips had.
Right. It's better than Thought Scour because it gives you a little bit of agency.
Yeah.
Right. You're not trying to just bulk fill the graveyard like you were in the Shadow days when you wanted to cast a Gurmag Angler. Rest in peace, Gurmag Angler, a card that did not get on our list. Yeah. And so it's better. It fills your yard for Murktide. It lets you decide if you want to fill the yard or not.
For Breach too.
Yeah, for Breach as well. And then Serum Visions, Thought Scour, those are two cards that we used to play all the time when we wanted cantrips and are just, there's one of them sorcery speed and the other one doesn't have enough agency over what goes in the graveyard.
Sometimes putting cards in your graveyard can be good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I still think that that's fine from a Thought Scour perspective. It's just why not have the upside of deciding what you're going to do when it comes to Consider. So in my mind, there are still some situations where if we only had Opt, I would still be like, I really just want to play Thought Scour over Opt. That would happen sometimes. But I think with Consider in the format, it's not the same anymore.
Yeah, Serum Visions, that's a card that should be in Pioneer. I'm going to say that a lot this episode.
It wouldn't be played in Pioneer because they have you have Opt and Consider in Pioneer. I don't think it would scratch it.
Yeah, that's why I just put it in.
Why not?
Just add it.
And of course, all of these are just bad versions of two banned cards, Ponder and Preordain, neither one of which we really got to play very much. But
This is a bad road on this episode, but should these cards be banned anymore?
no, we're not doing that. We're not talking about that.
But they're very important to the format before we played it.
Yeah, I think they're probably just too powerful for one mana. They dig too much. They let you see too many cards to be able to do it. We leave that for 2 mana spells like Expressive Iteration now.
Right, and I think Ponder takes too long to resolve because then you have to decide whether you want to shuffle your deck.
Right. You're going to sit there forever and decide.
Yeah.
But there are 2 other draw cards on here that are both banned.
Yeah.
That I guess we would call draw cards. I mean, one of them is Faithless Looting, which is so much more than a cantrip, but kind of is a cantrip.
Another card that took too long for everyone to realize just how good it was, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I really like looking at these cards and kind of just thinking, like, what did people use them for when I started playing Magic? And then what did people start using them for as that made them bannable?
Well, I think with Faithless Looting, the turning point was the printing of Arclight Phoenix, and prior to that, the payoffs just weren't as good as Arclight Phoenix was, because the payoffs were Lingering Souls, and
I mean, that deck was good. You're sort of talking about Marduk Pyromancer, which was around before Phoenix, right? So Faithless Looting was really only used in Dredge for a while, and that's where people were really
and like
going
Reanimator decks,
Yeah.
like broken Reanimator decks, that
Like
went
Gristle-
off like 20% of the time.
Grishelbrand.
But
yeah,
again, that was a consistency problem that Phoenix didn't have.
right.
Yeah. But I mean, Dredge, I think it was a combination of Dredge becoming steadily more powerful and then Arclight Phoenix.
Yes.
And then just kind of like the fact that it enabled so many things in the future. Like, Hollow One took a huge advantage of it, which was like a moderately broken deck for a while.
Yeah. Turns out putting cards in your graveyard can be good. And then the last one's Arkham's Astrolabe, which is a card that I don't think we realized was going to be good enough to be bannable, but a single mana to draw a card, fix your mana, and something you can blink with Yorion certainly made it some powerful glue that we all hated.
You know what I just remembered? Faithless Looting had Flashback.
Yeah.
You just remembered this?
Just remember that. So easy to forget.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some things that I don't want to talk about very long, which is good because they're not that very good cards. Control Stuff.
Oh, do I have a take in here for you, Shane? But
man.
I'm going to make you wait a minute.
Perfect. Love it.
So at the top end of the Control Stuff section are the Planeswalkers.
Yep.
Jace the Mind Sculptor, was it good? Did it need to be banned?
It needed to be pre-banned at the time.
It needed to be pre-banned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if people had come into Modern as a format and just been playing Stoneforge Jace mirrors again, like they were just doing in Standard not too long before, it would have hurt the format at the beginning.
So I guess having it pre-banned was necessary for developing the format's identity
Yes.
in the early days.
I think so. Was it ever great once it was unbanned? I don't think it was ever great, but it's a fun tool to have around. It's a nice piece of nostalgia.
Teferi Time Raveler, a card that sort of reshaped the identity of control decks in the format forever.
Yep.
Yeah, wild. Wild what it does for 3 mana.
Yeah, that static ability. Would that static ability be good on any other 3-mana spell? Like, what if it was just a 3-mana enchantment that had,
No.
That exists. I think there's something that exists like that already. So I think the fact that it's a planeswalker that you can draw a card off of it,
Right.
and occasionally
Play
Supreme
sorceries.
Verdict someone at instant speed is,
I mean, like bouncing a token is hugely relevant. Like, bouncing someone's construct, someone's Rhino, like, is actual value sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the 5-mana Teferi, which is just sort of like the best Obnixilis ever.
Yes,
And-
this is like, if you don't deal with this, I'm just going to beat you slowly.
Yeah. Plus is to draw a card. Okay, that's totally normal. And then Supreme Verdict is on this list as well.
Yeah.
It's a good control card.
Yeah.
It's the best Wrath in Modern because it can't be countered. It is what it
Exactly.
is.
Yes.
And it's the only true Wrath on this list.
Yeah, well, it's tough because Wrath of God's always been like a sideboard card. Damnation's basically a sideboard card, but Supreme Verdict is the one that gets played main deck sometimes. Only sometimes now. That Wraths are not very good in Modern anymore.
We have one creature on this list, and that's Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath.
Yes,
what
that's
it's
the
called?
card.
Wow, a card that we hated playing against. We wanted to be banned. They dragged their feet on banning it for a bit. I think it was legal for over a year, or maybe about a
It
year.
was close, yeah.
And although we all rejoiced when it finally bit the bullet, nowadays when we became Rhino Boys, here's my hot take: wouldn't Uro be fantastic in Team of Rhinos?
That's enough.
Of course it would.
That would be the best plan B after opponents countered all of your Cascade spells.
Yeah, I mean, Uro would be great in every deck because Uro is a great, like one of the best creatures of the past 3-4 years.
At least, maybe longer,
Yeah, it's
maybe less
bonkers.
tenures. All right, speaking of Cascade, you guys talk about your favorite stuff because this is a core of a deck that everybody knows.
Yeah.
Cascade is something that's broken all the time, or occasionally.
Occasionally.
Here it is.
Yeah, the addition of Shardless Agent just made it possible to Cascade. And even though most Cascade decks are now only playing Shardless Agent and Violent Outburst, even though they could have always been playing Violent Outburst and Ardent Plea, the fact that Shardless Agent is a body too that is in blue-green, I think.
Yes.
It's also the colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a color overlap.
Is that it doesn't have to target to do something, and it's the color overlap.
Well, right, but Ardent Plea doesn't have to target anything.
Right.
But what's the Rakdos colored one that does?
It makes things not able to block.
Yes.
Right.
But yes,
Demonic Dread, I think it's
yeah,
called.
that's it. So of course, yeah, Stan said Shardless Agent, Violent Outburst are 2 Cascade cards. What are we cascading into, Stanislav?
Crashing Footfalls is my personal favorite.
Yes, I crashed Footfalls on Friday and had a blast.
Yeah. Yeah, so on Friday, the three of us played a Modern Side event, and we all went 2-0-1 chopping in round 3.
Yeah.
Probably our best collective finish as a team of podcast hosts.
Oh, for sure. And we're all going to go spend those 12 tickets or whatever we have at the wonderful prize wall right after this.
Yes.
But we also, of course, have Living End.
Yeah.
Another one of the mainstays of Modern has gone, as if you've listened to the episode with CCR, it's gone through ups and downs and has been a legitimate Modern deck for quite some time. Yeah, so Shardless Agent, the biggest get, I think, in this pool.
Yeah. Sorry to say we don't have any Living End attendant creatures with it.
Because they all do the same thing.
Yeah, all you Living End stands are just going to have to be okay with us acknowledging Living End here.
Yeah,
now.
we did mention Street Wraith.
Fair.
And Force of Negation.
Why don't we talk about something that's bad now?
Ooh, Midrange is dead.
Yeah, this next category is called Midrange is Dead in homage to one of our early episodes. So we're going to make Shane talk about this list.
Oh, God.
Shane, talk about these cards.
All these cards are bad.
They're all bad.
Or banned.
Or banned.
One is still probably good, but it is banned.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about the good one that I never got to play with. Not even in Pioneer, because somehow it's not Pioneer viable, but we know why.
Because of fetch lands.
Yes.
Thanks, Modern.
Deathrite Shaman.
You're welcome.
So the 1-mana creature planeswalker, Deathrite Shaman. I never got to play with it. Its abilities seem really good. I was watching some of this the Will Hall Experience stream, and there was like an old tournament that had Deathrite Shaman, and I was like, oh, that seems extremely good.
Yes. It's unbelievable what that card did at the time. Honestly, I was playing Modern at the time that it was around. I remember when it was banned. It's just an incredible card. It's so incredible that our friend, Wei, got a top 16 or top 32 at a Grand Prix in Chicago with a burn deck splashing splashing Deathrite Shaman to be able to do extra damage to people by getting rid of cards and gaining a little bit of life for himself.
So he was basically his Grim Lavamancer.
Yeah, it was that's what he did instead of Grim Lavamancer. Exactly.
That's amazing.
All right, other bad cards on this list, or other cards now that are bad. Tarmogoyf?
Womp womp.
Man, it's just, this is Modern in a card. Like, just like showing the dynamic nature, of power level, of price level. A card that was over $200 when it was only printed in Future Sight, and now is $15 just over the course of my entire Modern playing career.
I think more cards should be $15 than $200.
I respectfully disagree. I would like all my cards be very expensive.
Only when I'm selling them.
Yes.
But I think when I'm buying them, I prefer that they be closer to 15.
Perfect. All right, let's close this out because the other cards that are on this list that we just want to say goodbye to, send off with a salute, I guess, is Dark Confidant. Shane bought, sold, and bought, sold so many play sets of these over the years.
Are you still holding a bag?
I have one Dark Confidant.
All right, that's good.
Liliana the Veil, Abrupt Decay. That card's probably not bad, but it's not getting the play that it used to be. It's still a utility card. And then Bloodbraid Elf.
Yeah.
Bloodbraid Elf. Remember when that was banned?
Yes.
Remember when it was unbanned and nobody cared?
It was. I think Bloodbraid Elf was good until Shardless Agent.
Bloodbraid Elf was the card that everyone wanted to be good and then slowly realized it wasn't.
But no, it's not playing Jund, it's not playing Panza, and then MH2 kind of made Bloodbraid Elf not as relevant.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on because there are a couple of good cards that were in Jund that are still left, although people debate about how good these are too, and those are our 1-mana discard spells that are good in Modern.
Thoughtseize and Inquisition of Kozilek.
I could talk about Thoughtseize for like 5 minutes, but we don't have time. But yeah, Thoughtseize is just one of the most elegant and beautiful and amazing spells.
Remember we did single card dive downs?
Yeah.
We did one that was all about Chalice of the Void. We did one that was all about surgical extraction. Maybe someday we could come back and do a deep dive into how to Thoughtseize people.
Yeah.
If there was heuristics.
Yeah, if Reed Duke ever answers our emails.
Yeah, exactly. I think we did a pretty deep dive into it on our Jund episode, but still, maybe it's worth going back.
Yeah, I think the thing about Thoughtseize and Inquisition for that matter is that it separates the players who are just casting spells to cast them from the players who know how to make informed decisions based on the information that they collect.
Right.
Because you can sometimes just win a game off the back of the information collected and the sequencing you have to do from looking at an opponent's hand at the start of the game.
Yeah.
So think about that more often when you cast your Thoughtseizes.
Yeah. Tough to find spots for Inquisition and Kozilek these days with the pressure from all the good cards from Modern Horizons 2 and other things. I don't think we're going to see a lot of decks that have 6-7 discard spells main anymore.
Yeah, my parting thoughts on that is that Inquisition of Kozilek's price goes down because Burn's price goes down. And I think Inquisition is great when you want to discard cards without paying any life.
By the way, I have another take on this, which is that there's a lot of cheaty stuff going on with casting costs in Modern these days, where it's a 5-mana spell that you cast for free, like an Evoke Elemental or Leyline Binding.
Yes.
Inquisition is a lot worse in a format that has fake mana efficiency instead of real mana efficiency.
That's also true.
That's also true. All right, next. Let's talk about some more cards that Shane used to love that I've always hated.
1 + 1 + 1
equals 7.
Equals 7.
It's that time. We are going to rip through a list of these cards because there are a lot of definitive Modern cards in this list, but they all do one thing.
They all do the same. They all make this deck work, and this deck has been so important for so long, and some of these cards are useful other places. So let's make this the bucket.
Number 1 is the Tron lands.
Yes, the Tron lands. They exist for some reason.
Yeah.
Another 8th edition relic.
I think so. Yes, they are an 8th edition relic, yeah.
So yeah, just something that was there, and they're kind of innocuous unless you get them all on the battlefield. And then there's lots of ways to do that. So we have things like Ancient Stirrings, we have things like Expedition Map, we have Sylvan Scrying, all these ways to get lands, both Tron lands and, in utility lands and other decks, maybe something like Valakut decks or Titan decks. Sometimes we're having Expedition Map, right?
Sure.
Especially with Saga, they'll search it up.
Yeah.
And then what are you doing with that? Well, I guess you are casting really big spells, like Karn Liberated.
Is Karn Liberated good?
No, not anymore. It's fine. It's it's a really big Lily. How good's Lily? So
yeah.
And we have Karn the Great Creator, which is good in lots of places. We have Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, a true finisher. When Tron versus Control, this is one of the ways that you have a chance against a control deck.
I always feel like Ulamog is scarier than Karn.
Oh, I agree.
Because the cast trigger.
It's just harder to get there though, because it takes an extra turn and it takes an extra tower, and they don't always get there. But it is my least favorite part of playing against Tron now. Is like I think I'm good, and then they're like Ulamog, and you're like, oh yeah.
You can sometimes beat the first Ulamog, but the second one is usually too much.
So that's kind of like what goes on in Green Tron.
I also want to talk about, Dave, one of the most important parts of Karn the Great Creator, which is the now banned Mycosynth.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I was going to throw that into the
Eldrazi-tron
bucket because
Yes.
Greentron didn't do that.
Oh, it did.
Not as much, right? Did it?
Oh, it
sure
was
it
part
did.
of the game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought
sure.
that it was mostly Eldrazi-tron. Maybe just Eldrazi-tron was more popular at the time that this was happening. But, Mycosynth Lattice, the banned card that some people think should not be banned. I think it should be banned because it's not fun.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's anti-fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Karn the Great Creator, Mycosynth lock. And then, of course, as Dave mentioned, we have the weird cousin of Greentron, which is Eldrazi-tron. So we have Eldrazi Temple, one of the cards that makes this deck, and another broken Eldrazi deck that we'll talk about later work. And then, of course, we have important pieces of that deck, such as Thought Not Seer is kind of our standout card. If we had more time, we could list a number of cards that were only in Eldrazi-tron and important to it. And I guess we forgot to mention Wormcoil Engine when we talked about Greentron.
Yeah. Hugely important.
Yeah, a card that I think we're going to discover is no longer good either.
It might not be.
I disagree, but I hate that card. All right, so we've gone through 71 cards so far. We are going to take a quick break, but what we want to do is share with you some recordings that we got from friends of the pod, people that we've known about their favorite cards. Not in Modern, just their favorite cards overall. So we got some floor interviews with several people. We're going to drop them throughout the episode, but here's the first break. We're going to throw some in.
All right, I am at the regional championship at Dreamhack Atlanta, standing with the one and only, the venerable, aspiring Spike. Spike, Everett, tell us, what's your favorite Magic card?
It's a Jade Avenger.
Jade Avenger?
Yeah.
From the limited fodder from MH2. Tell me why.
It's like not bad and limited and MH2. I don't know. MH2 is definitely my favorite Magic set. That's maybe a controversial opinion, but it's brought me the most fun and the most joy. And it became an inside joke in my Twitch chat, Jade Avenger, after the set released. It's like a cool samurai frog. The art is really cool. And I would get the same question over and over and over again about what cards to include post MH2, as you could maybe imagine, and I would just start answering Jade Avenger if I had answered the same question in the last 10 seconds and see it again.
So I think the $1 million follow-up question is, have you ever registered it in a constructed deck that you did well or even trophied with?
Of course not. It's not, just because you like a card doesn't mean you want to play with it. I have the foil, non-foil artist proof of both the sketch and the non-sketch. I have a canvas print, I have a regular print, all signed. I love the card. I would never register it, though.
You heard it here first.
All right, I'm here with Brad Nelson. Brad, you've been in the game for a long time.
Yeah.
Shows a lot of cards that you like. But for our 200th episode, what's your favorite Magic card?
My favorite Magic card is Knight of the White Orchid.
Okay.
It's weird, I know, but so many Magic cards get better when you're on the play.
Yeah.
And I am a huge fan of transitional sideboards and trying to find ways to win on the draw. And Knight of the White Orchid is just this perfect mix of deck building and sideboarding and strategy and breaking serve. And it's just always been one of my favorite deck building ways to play Magic.
That's a good point, yeah, because so often we're so many cards, so many decks are just, if you're on the play, you're in an opposite shape, but Knight of the White Orchid switches that up.
Yeah, I've done so many times where I'd splash blue so that on the draw I'm able to turn 3, play Knight of the White Orchid, go get a Hollowed Fountain, Disdainful Stroke my opponent's 5-drop, untap, play my 5-drop. Yeah, it's been so much fun. This is standard 15 years ago. Magic's changed now, so I don't even know how good it would be, but it's still my favorite thing.
All right, thanks, Brad.
Yep.
All right, I'm here with Sky, Darth Jason. We are at DreamHack Atlanta, and we're preparing for our 200th episode. We're asking people a simple question. What's your favorite Magic card?
For me, it's got to be Dragonlord Atarka.
Why Dragonlord Atarka?
I have some fond memories of it. I won the GP with it, and honestly, it's hard to go wrong with an 8/8 flying trampler that also just gets to murder everything.
Perfect. 8/8 flying tramplers that murder things. You've heard it here. Thanks, Sky.
Thanks so much. Happy 200th.
I'm here with fellow Magic podcaster and one of the all-time greats, Sam Black. Sam, I gotta ask, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
I've given a lot of different answers to this over time because there are a lot of different cards that I've had fun with at various times in various formats and stuff. But I'm going to go back to one of my first favorite cards, Corpse Dance, because I've been playing a lot of Commander lately, and so I'm getting to play a format where I can play that card again, and it's still just as fun as always.
And what does that card do? Is that a reanimator target?
Sort of. It's 2 and a black. It's Shallow Grave with buyback, if you're familiar with Shallow Grave. It's 2 and a black, put the top creature card from your graveyard into play with haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step, buyback 2. But, it doesn't have any kind of unearth type clause where the creature is definitely getting exiled. So if you sacrifice the creature or it dies or something, then it goes back to your graveyard and you can get it back again. And it's a graveyard order matters card, which I appreciate because since I started playing a million years ago, I've just always kept my graveyard in the right order. And so it's nice that I don't have to go out of my way to play with that card properly.
All right, I am here with Piper Powell. And Piper, I'd love to ask you, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
I'd have to say right now, probably Mist Hollow Griffin. The first deck that I really fell in love with and played a lot was Legacy Food Chain. And casting Mist Hollow Griffin, exiling it with Deathrite Shaman, exiling it with Force of Will, combo it with Food Chain was some of the most fun I had at Magic when I was younger and less experienced, and it stayed with me for a while.
So I have to show my age. I don't know what that card is. Do you remember the Oracle text? What is that card?
It is 2 blue for a 3/3 flyer that you can cast from exile. It combos with the enchantment Food Chain. That you can exile a creature you control to make X +1 mana of any color, where X is its mana cost, so you make infinite mana.
Sounds good.
It's pretty good. It's pretty fun. You get to make an arbitrarily big walking ballista.
Is it still playable in Legacy?
Not at all. It's a fond memory. I will not play it again.
So we spent a lot of time dithering over whether or not cards are still good. Let's move on to a next section that we like to call "These cards are just good. Get over it."
Yeah. Guess what the lead card in this section is? This was Stan's brainchild because we didn't know what to do with these cards, but we knew we had to talk about them.
Wrenn 6.
Wrenn 6 is just good.
It's just good.
Get over it.
Deal with it.
Next.
Urza Saga.
Sunglasses dropping down onto Wrenn 6.
Urza Saga, maybe not as amazing as it used to be, but it's still just a powerhouse of an enchantment land, and it's just good. We have to get over it.
Here's a hot take for you. Urza Saga is the only good creature land still playable in Modern.
I love that take, and we'll talk more about it later. You said that last night, and I was like, yeah, it's true. It's the only land that turns into a creature that we still do something with. Now, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah,
but boy, it makes big creatures sometimes.
Indeed, and multiples, and does other stuff.
Yep.
Weird.
Yep. Let's talk about the next one on here I would throw in this is Omnath.
Sure.
Omnath, a card hated by many people, but it's just good. It's going to be good until it's gone.
That one's hard for me to get over, just because it's just so much text. Every turn, it does 4 things.
Yeah, it's true.
Get over it, Stan.
I'll try.
How about cards that are less powerful now? So those are the 3 bangers, I think. Wrenn 6, Urza Saga, and Omnath. But there's a couple of cards that are just kind of utility glue that are cards we like playing, like being played in the format right now, but they aren't as splashy. One that I really love from this list is Seasoned Pyromancer.
Yeah. I remember this card being beloved among us when it was printed. I almost feel like it's underplayed now, but maybe that's just because it hasn't found the right place. But whenever it's in a deck, it's so good for that deck.
I sure like it in Scam, I'll say. Yeah. It's a nice card.
I feel like this card you could vote this card off the list, but I think we all like it so much that it's just going to make it.
Yeah. And how about a couple lower power cards? Another one that draws cards, Ledger Shredder.
Yes, it does draw cards.
One of the newest Modern cards that's good from this year.
You think Ledger Shredder has what it takes to last?
I think a flying Tarmogoyf that draws you cards is pretty good.
Okay, well, it's settled then. Get over it.
I don't think it's going to last forever. I think the fact that you can get it out of lightning bolt range pretty quickly helps a lot.
The turn it comes down usually.
Yes. The hard part is getting it out of Unholy Heat range. So
right.
and it never goes out of Fatal Push range. But I think it's going to be a good piece for a little bit.
Esper Sentinel draws cards too, and that's on this list.
I think that card's amazing just because it's sort of the best the most appropriate for modern taxing effect that I think there is, which is I need something really crushing to be able to keep my white deck
annoying
in contention.
Yeah. And then finally, this is the only place we figured Monastery Sorcerer belongs.
Yes.
It's just good. It's just in a lot of decks. It's in prowess decks. It's in burn decks. It's in weird like spell-based synergy decks. It's in a lot of places.
It's a good card.
Get over it.
It used to be the best red 1-drop. It's not anymore. What's the best red 1-drop now?
I believe it's our friend Ragavan the Nimble Pilferer.
That's right. Now, we put Ragavan in a different category. Where did we put Ragavan?
We put in the tempo category, didn't we?
So welcome to the tempo stuff bucket.
Yes.
Who wants to argue about what tempo means?
Let's do that for half an hour.
Yeah.
So when we defined tempo once upon a time, I think we nailed it, and it's just kind of been my fallback ever since, and I'm not even going to repeat it.
Oh, wow.
Perfect. Go find that in our archives if you want to see Stan's perfect definition of tempo.
I don't know if it was even mine. But
for now, the perfect tempo card, I think, actually is Ragavan. It's a card that did change Modern. It's part of people's complaints about Modern Horizon 2. We get it. We understand. But it's a good card, and I really enjoy playing with it.
Yeah, I think even though it's so powerful, I think Ragavan is also part of what makes Modern a more interactive format now in its own way, because it forces a response, and it goes well into decks that can cast responsive spells. I guess we call them reactive spells.
Yep. Responsive, reactive, either
cool.
one's fine.
There's another really good one drop on here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Ragavan.
Okay.
It's Death Shadow.
Death Shadow.
And that's a great Michael Rappaport?
Just Rap. Not Michael Rappaport. We were watching him on Friends last night.
Yeah, well, remember when famous character actor Michael Rappaport was on our show a couple times?
No, Michael Rapp, known shadow scientist.
When the first time he was on our show and he defined Shadow as a tempo deck, I think that was a huge unlock for me too, because it's perfect. Cheap threats that you protect with some interactive spells.
Yeah.
Sometimes you call it Protect the Queen, or we can call it a nice tempo strategy.
Yeah.
Protect the Death Shadow.
There's two more tempo threats from Modern Horizons 2 that are on this list, of course, as well, and that's Dragon's Rage Channeler and Murktide Regent. And those are two spells that really help define a deck, along with Ragavan. I mean, Murktide is like the ultimate Delver in some ways. It's a giant creature, closes games fast.
Well, I almost see it as Death Shadow and Murktide are two opposite ends of a spectrum, and Ragavan and DRC are the cards that kind of make the two similar shells, but with different color identities.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Temur Battle Rage is in this section.
Right, because it enabled Death Shadow to become a tempo deck that had a real ability to just flash and kill somebody.
Yes.
So it enabled that whole tempo strategy by providing a cheap way to kind of up the threat level. And at the other end of that spectrum, because Temur Battle Rage is a really all-in card, we have a card that's found its way in a lot of tempo-y, non-tempo decks to gain tempo, and that's...
Can you say tempo again, Dave?
Sure, tempo. Fire and Ice, which might be weird to be grouped with these cards, but I think when you think about what that tool is for, that is what it's for. Now, Stan, this is one of your favorite cards.
Of late.
Yeah.
It's very good. It's a very good card.
Not only is the ice tempo play so good, but fire just finishes so many games.
Yeah, I had an opponent yesterday who was like, well, if I don't block, then you have to have double fire to kill me. And I was like, are you looking in my glasses? Are they reflecting back into you? Like, yeah, because I had double fire and I killed him. It was great. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Since Fire and Ice is kind of a 2-for-1, sometimes we had these two important cards that were just floating around on our brainstorming list that we could not figure out how to put together. So we just put them in a bucket that says these are 2-for-1s.
Two 2-for-1s.
Two 2-for-1s. What are these two 2-for-1s?
My personal favorite on this list, and actually one of my favorite cards in Modern, if not one of the all-timers for me, Expressive Iteration.
Yep. Who thought it was going to be this good? Todd Anderson did. Everett did. Stan kind of did. Me?
You were like, but light up the stage.
I was, no, this one.
But light up the stage is 1 mana sometimes.
In prowess, I was.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of those cards that when I saw it on the spoiler list, I was like, it was like that meme of the guy that's like, I'm happy for you or sorry that happened, but I ain't reading all that, bro.
Yeah,
like that's what that card looked like to me.
Yeah, one of the best sorceries in Modern.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe the best sorcery.
It's certainly the best draw spell in Modern, no doubt. I don't think it's close.
Can we talk about a card I like? Kolaghan's Command.
Yeah.
This is another one that's on the bubble. I feel like if someone else made this list, it might not be on it, but it's it did so much for so long. And I think it was, again, a card that really taught me about the value of a 2-for-1.
And also just a card that has good utility,
Yes.
right? Like being able to review this and go, okay, it gets rid of an artifact. I'm not going to need that often, but when I do need it, I really need it. You know, being able to do 2 damage, discard a card, like all of the modes are good on this card.
I think it's cool that this can live in the sideboard or main decks, and it's respectable in either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that they reprinted this card as Prismari Command, and now half the decks that would have been Grixis and run Kolaghan's Command don't have to do that, and they just play Prismari Command instead.
Good cards will always be hanging around until Expressive Iteration gets banned. Next up, we have 5+1 cards that are kind of the new foundation of Modern.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly 5 cards that changed Modern for sure. The 6th card that's here is just for laughs.
Yeah.
but-
So what do we have? We have the elementals. We have Subtlety, Fury, Endurance, Solitude, and Grief. And then their friend along the way is Ephemerate, which we see in many of these elemental decks. And so each of these cards does something different, very different, and have all come into play more than I expected, where it's like, and less than other people expected, right? Like Grief has been a card that people were like, oh, this is going to have to be banned immediately, and has now just become a role player in the format.
Not true, though. I think that for a long time it didn't have a home, and then Scam was designed. And now we have a Grief deck that behaves the way that people thought a Grief deck, abusing Grief deck was going to be played.
Yeah, but I think what people were afraid of is that everyone is just going to make their deck do this, and it's going to be part of like some overpowered or just an effect that like a Stoneforge Batterskull, where everyone's just like, oh, they're just going to put Stoneforge Batterskull and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out you can't quite do that
No.
because the reanimation spells are so bad. It turns out that playing Grief with white cards is also bad, and it's not the way to do it. But I do think that we now have a home where all of these cards comfortably fit. The ones that get abused the most, of course, are Fury, Solitude, and Grief because they're proactive. Endurance and Subtlety are not proactive effects, but they're still extremely powerful.
Yeah, and they each do something in certain metas. Like this was something that people I think have complained a lot about, including myself, that, oh, we have these free cards that you have to know how to play around. But I think they have eventually been fairly balanced, where on the actual mana cost, they're kind of expensive. You do have to lose a card from hand. And so overall, they've increased the interactivity of the format. They've increased the ability to deal with certain board states. They have pushed certain decks out of the meta from time to time, or permanently with the case of Fury, perhaps. But they are an important new pillar of Modern, and they're not going anywhere. And so it's just kind of, I'm trying to lean in.
I think at most, someday, Ephemerate could be banned, even though it's not a powerful card, because people feel like it enables too much of a strategy of abusing Solitude or whatever, for example. Not likely, but we also have Ephemerate in this bucket because this is the thing that made Ephemerate go from a niche card and something like Soul Flare to
Soul Herder.
What's Soul Flare?
That's
the one
the
from
Delve
Pioneer.
card, yeah.
Okay. Soul Herder to something that's in a tier 1 deck.
Dave, what's your favorite elemental?
Fury.
Stan, what's your favorite elemental?
Fury. Shane?
Fury.
All right, moving on. One of my favorite cards that used to be a control card, and now it's an infect card, and I guess it's...
We don't know what it is anymore, but it was banned.
The White Tarmogoyf, and that's Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah. We're going to take a little break with some fun here and talk about Stoneforge and Friends, because this package is important to Modern ever since it's been unbanned, 5 years ago?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. What are the cards, Dave?
Stoneforge Mystic,
Batterskull.
best friend Batterskull, and then second best friend Sword of Fire and Ice.
Do you remember that golden period after Stoneforge was unbanned when we were all trying to figure out, what's the right sword to get?
I actually was going to say I remember not liking this period of Modern at all, because it was basically just, what is the best Stoneforge Mystic deck? And it turned out none of them.
Yeah, people spent a lot of money to buy the Stoneforge packages, and really, it's more utility than it used to be. It's sort of what a deck is based around, and we'll talk about that. Stan called it, in fact, letting one of our jokes out of the barn a little too early. But
they didn't have to know that.
Fired.
But Yeah, this is like the bygone version of this. You did see people occasionally playing blue-white control with this package in it and doing okay, especially people who really were good control players.
I also think it's important to note that this unbanning was important for Modern because it happened in the same announcement as the Faithless Looting banning.
Yeah.
And I think it was like a critical way to keep the format very interesting during a huge upheaval.
True.
And I think it did to some extent.
It did, but guess what? We're going to talk more about Stoneforge later.
Okay. So Stoneforge, we missed her, we got her back. This next section is called We Miss Her, We Want Her Back.
Or maybe just me.
Maybe just you, Dave.
Depending on it. This is the Splinter Twin package. Splinter Twin, Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, and Pester Might Deceiver Exarch as a single card. You're getting 2 cards for the value of 1 in that one.
Technically, Kiki is still legal and can be put in decks.
So is Pester Might. I registered it for a large event and really regretted that. Do you remember when that happened?
Well, I was there.
Yeah, you played the same deck, didn't you?
Yeah, I had Shadow of Doubt in my deck.
You had Shadow Down that time too.
No, that was that tournament.
What were we doing? My Brine Board Cutthroat Shadow of Doubt deck.
I thought I broke it.
How does Shadow of Doubt not make this list?
Because it's never been good.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I fell for Shadow, just like small diversion. Yeah, digression here. I remember the first time I fell for Shadow of Doubt, and it was when my dad still had cards, and he was like going through cards left over from his store. It was like Modern 2012, maybe. I saw somebody on Twitter talking about it. I called my dad. I was like, Dad, do you have any like bulk Ravnica rares? And he's like, yeah. I was like, do you have Shadow of Doubt? And he's like, I have 3 of them. And I was like, put them in an envelope and send them to me. I need them immediately. Never played them.
Yeah, probably for the best.
Yep. This is never happening. Splinter Twin's never coming back.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, I also fall in the camp that's, I don't know if it would be good enough if it came back. Who cares? It's not coming back. Don't worry about it.
It's not worth the risk.
Yep, not worth the risk. But,
And it's not worth talking about any longer.
Yep.
What we can talk about is one of my favorite sections. I'm just going to talk about all the Shane decks. Wise from your grave. It's Dredge Stuff. We've got Golgari Grave Troll, famously banned, unbanned, and banned again.
A card so good they had to ban it twice.
Yeah.
It is so good. It says Dredge 6. That's why it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, no surprises there.
Along for the ride, we have one of the spells. There's so many spells that made this deck happen, but I chose Cathartic Reunion because I like the art, and it did something that just made the deck tick on turn 2 extremely strongly.
And we already talked about Faithless Looting.
Yeah, exactly. Life from the Loam, an interesting card that doesn't even see much play in contemporary Dredge lists anymore. This card, of course, has wider utility than just this deck, but again, a novel effect that did something cool that made the deck move and also allowed you to finish with it. And then we also put Vengevine in this category. Not a Dredge card.
Vengevine's so interesting to me because its shoulders are broad and strong from carrying so many other banned cards on its back.
It's true. It has shown up in a couple of banned card situations with Faithless Looting, with Bridge from Below, and Bridgevine, and then Hogak ultimately, which is what Bridgevine turned into essentially and became the really, really broken version.
Yeah, I almost wonder if WotC just keeps it in the format so they always know, like, oh, if it's an Vengevine deck, we should probably keep an eye on it and get it out of here eventually.
It's fascinating. I mean, one time we called Vengevine the creature Arclight Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
And that's basically what it is. And I think people will keep trying to find ways to break that card. The hard part now is really, it's probably not breaking the card, it's getting them into your graveyard in a way that's fast. And you still see that in like Oops All Spells, stuff like that. All right, that's enough Rise from Your Grave. Let's talk about another deck that RIP'd, kind of, although it's still around in a different way.
Our Robot Friends.
That is our Robot Overlords affinity.
I remember where I was when I found out Mox Opal got banned. I was in a taxi cab in London, England, about to hop on a train for Amsterdam, Netherlands.
And when you got on that train, you realized you were looking at a new and better day.
And I also realized that getting the BNR announcement at 5 o'clock is so much more productive to the day than hearing about it at 10 in the morning and then having to listen to the chatter instead of working.
You mean being in our Discord?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, understood. All right, well, Mox Opal was at lots of different places. It was in KCI. KCI, that's ultimately what led to Mox Opal being banned. But before that, well before that, it was extremely important in what was the standard best aggro deck in Modern for many years, and that's Affinity. Affinity, we're talking about Arcbound Ravager, we're talking about Memnites and Cranial Plating, Springleaf Drum, and Inkmoth Nexus. A lot of these cards are still good and in other decks.
Yes.
But this is the core of the deck that actually was Shane's first deck that he bought in Modern, right?
That's true. I mean, I made like a Esper Mentor thing. This was my first legitimate like tier deck. You know, it was awesome. I mean, I had it half foiled. Like I had all the cheap foils, like were like reasonable at the time. But yeah, it's like we've seen these cards go other places. Like we've seen Springleaf Drum and Arcbound Ravager and Inkmoth Nexus, Memnites, you know, all that kind of stuff have been elsewhere, but they really were their first home was Affinity.
I can't believe Springleaf Drum is a playable card.
Right?
Have you ever played with it?
I have, and in Soul.
Okay.
And I always want to take it out, and then I'm always like, I never should have done that.
Yeah.
This card's just too good.
It's the speed. It's the speed.
Cheating on mana is good. Can be good, Stan.
Yeah. So Affinity turned into, my opinion, there's two decks that combined into one deck, and that deck is Hammer. All right. So in a way, Hammer is the combination of three decks, really. It's a combination of Stoneforge, the combination of Infect's game plan,
yes,
basically, and Affinity's good cards into a single new package. That's Hammer time. However, we want to talk about Affinity or talk about Infect for a minute and just acknowledge Glistener Elf and Blighted Agent as the true heroes that they were of a weird aggro deck that put pressure on decks that were trying to screw around doing anything other than killing their creatures.
Exactly.
Back in 2016 kind of era. So you two, we'll see you on the flip side. But Hammer.
Sigarda's Aid, Pure Steel Paladin, Colossus Hammer.
It's like you look at these cards, you're like, why in the universe do we have Sigarda's Aid and Colossus Hammer on a Modern top 200 cards list? And it's because somehow this meme became everyone else's real dream.
It's because cheating on mana can be good. That's what it is.
Yes.
And Hammer nowadays has been around for years.
Yeah, it's just a deck.
It predates MH2.
Yeah. And it's, according to Goldfish, at least for right now, it's the number 2 deck in the meta of Modern at the moment. Question about how accurate that is, but we've certainly seen it come back. You know, we thought it would die after Luris was gone, and here it is. Here it is.
Now, Dave, you brought Hammer.
I did.
Do you love this deck now? Are you a Hammerhead?
I haven't even got a chance to play it. I brought two Modern decks with me. I played one Modern event and then did Sealed.
We've got chances today. Apparently there's on-demands.
Yeah.
So,
well, we'll see how long this podcast recording goes before we have to run off to the airplane. So I do have Hammer to try. I have been intending to try to learn it lately. Maybe this is what I'll be doing over the upcoming holiday season.
Here's a deck that Dave also thought he was going to play and never did. Titan Stuff.
You know, I'm just trying to pick up some of the people's decks that they like that you all refuse to play.
That's right.
And become their hero because I want the attention.
I mean, we call it Titan Stuff, but like importantly, and the reason we talk about these cards is they're good in other places. Like they're not just a single deck that's been around for a while. It's kind of a large family of decks that kind of talk about what this deck's ultimate game plan is.
But they all really revolve around one card.
Yeah.
Primeval Titan.
Yes.
Right?
Should we read the card?
No. We know what Primetime does. We hate what Primetime does. We're not going to play with it.
Yeah, there's also Amulet of Vigor, of course, that makes Badlands good.
Yeah, that's sort of the biggest version of Titan still and has been for many years at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we have to mention Summer Bloom at this point because the deck used to be called Amulet Bloom.
Right.
Before Amulet Titan, because Summer Bloom, just such a wildly effective spell at allowing you to play more lands on the turn, and so good that it had to be banned.
Before my time, but I'll take your word for it. The most recent addition to this deck was Dryad of the Elysian Grove.
Yeah, which enables things like Valakut, which is kind of that's the main reason you would play Dryad, right? Is that because it allows you to finish with Valakut still more efficiently and play more lands per turn?
Yeah. Yeah, no, Dryad is scary. Like, Dryad makes Primetime really Primeval Titan the one of 2 must-kill spells. Like, you can't let Dryad stick around because then all of their lands become Valakut targets.
Yeah, it allows you to do some fun enchantment blowouts with Dryad, but it's really more for their benefit than yours when they have it on the battlefield.
So we all know what Valakut does, and we hate it.
God, I really hate Valakut.
Me too.
Yeah.
Why is it not legendary?
Why?
It has many molten pinnacles.
Yeah, good thing it has that comma. Thankfully, that comma makes it easier to actually interact with Dryad.
The intervening if thing or whatever?
Exactly, yeah. And I think this is a good place to mention Scapeshift.
Yeah.
Which is the other Valakut card.
Sometimes you play them together. Sometimes you don't, you know?
It costs 4 mana, but you want to have more. You can't play it on turn 4, Stan.
Don't ever cast your Scapeshift on turn 4, everybody.
Yeah, unless you're crazy.
Unless you've had Azusa and cast Summer Bloom somehow when we weren't paying attention.
Yeah, sometimes with Primeval Titan, sometimes not. Sometimes just as a straight combo control deck.
Remember Field of the Dead?
Yeah, there's another banned card on this list.
Yeah.
Field of the Dead. Titan kind of got Field of the Dead banned, although Uro Control also kind of got Field of the Dead banned. Field of the Dead is just a bannable card.
Yeah, no, that was a good call.
Yeah, for sure. Another card I hated. This is just filled with cards that when I look deep inside my heart, I hate all these cards. I hate Dryad, too. We talked about Dryad. I hate it.
I hate Summoner's Pact, one of the last cards on this list we have not yet mentioned that just supports Primeval Titan decks because you have the mana to pay for the pact.
Let's talk about some cute, non-threatening creature decks after this, after the giant, menacing Jolly Green Giant. All right, so we're talking about tribal decks.
Right, and you can't mention tribal decks without mentioning Aether Vial.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key to all. Any tribal deck that was good in Modern just has to play Aether Vial, basically.
Now, is Aether Vial the fixed Black Lotus?
Excuse me?
What?
Because it cheats on mana, sometimes as much as 3 mana?
I mean, it's very fixed then because no one's really playing it.
Yeah, I would say no. It's not in that lineage to me.
I was just asking the questions.
I'm just posing the questions.
Perfect.
Yeah, but Aether Vial used to be, when tribal decks did not have to deal with Fury, that was the way that they really made things happen. Like, you wanted to see an Aether Vial on turn 1. It allowed you to accelerate into flooding the board. And now it's not super playable, which is kind of stinky, but it had its time in the sun.
Now let's talk about every merfolk with a little section we call Lord of Atlantis.
Yeah.
Yes, every merfolk.
Yep. Sorry, this stands in for all merfolk. We acknowledge you, merfolk deck. You were there. You were here. You've been here for a long time.
Oops, all Lord of Atlantis.
But we are acknowledging 2 humans, and I think there's a good reason. I think Champion of the Parish is basically humans.deck here. And that's definitely, it had its time in the sun for maybe 2 years as one of the best decks in Modern.
Yeah.
And then we have Meddling Mage, which of course is in humans, but we have seen it just be such a powerful utility spell that it can be run sideboard in Azoria space decks. And it's just something that has an effect that nothing else does. Congratulations, Chris Pakula, for being on a card that is never going to be replicated.
It's still good all these years later.
He's playing Hammer sideboards.
Exactly.
Hammer.
Hammer, depending on what you're doing.
The newest addition to this tribal family is Conspicuous Snoop.
And I think it's the best one right now.
Currently,
I love goblins. I've had a lot of fun playing that deck for the show. Snoop is a really powerful card. Makes Vial good. Having a combo capability in one of these decks pushes it over the edge for me. It's a cool card.
It was amazing that as soon as Snoop got printed, it actually introduced a brand new deck that has kind of ebbed and flowed, but keeps coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that supports tribal decks a lot of times, and other kinds of decks, creature decks, mana dorks. So we have our dork section is next.
Again, this is not as full as it could be, but I think it hits the highest points of the format for at least my memory.
Yeah. And those 3 cards would be Noble Hierarch, Birds of Paradise, Utopia Sprawl.
But Utopia Sprawl's not a dork, Dave.
But it is. Isn't it, Stan?
I would call it that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we could very easily have something like Devoted Druid in place of Utopia Sprawl, but why? Because Utopia Sprawl has been in many more decks than just like Devoted Druid combo.
Yeah. Notice we did not put Abundant Growth anywhere on here. Or what is that one? The 4-color one? That's not a dork.
I think that's
just
Abundant
draw
Growth. Yeah. And I guess we didn't have Llanowar Elves on here, but that's because Noble Hierarch is the good Llanowar Elf.
Yes.
Exactly. And even Ignoble Hierarch is the good Llanowar Elf, even though it sees less play.
Yeah, Noble Hierarch is just, it's not as good as it used to be, but when I started playing Modern, it was like, what, a $50 card?
Oh, yeah.
That
so
desperately
expensive.
needed to reprint.
Yeah.
We probably should have put Ignoble in here because it sees more play now than Noble, thanks to Yawgmoth.
True.
Let's just argue about it for a while.
Good idea.
On mic.
We're just both going to talk about it, and that's going to be a bonus card for the listeners.
Bonus card, yes. I mean, we'll have Ig in parentheses in front of Noble. It'll be both.
Yeah.
Little cheat.
Now, Birds of Paradise, that also sees play in Yawgmoth, right?
Yep.
So at least it's still Modern playable for now.
Oh, absolutely.
And has stuck around forever.
Yep. In alpha. One of the cards in alpha in Modern as well. So that's the dorks. Dorks are important, but they are a very narrow part of the community, the Modern community of cards, that is. So we've talked about tribal decks. We've talked about mana dorks now. What are people doing with mana dorks these days? I'd say a lot of times when you're playing mana dorks, you're also doing creature combo shenanigans.
Yes.
And that's highlighted by a number of searching cards or payoff cards or protection cards. Collected Company is the number one among those, I would think, right now, as far as something that, warms my heart, although that's less powerful in Modern than it used to be a little bit.
For sure. It has Time in the Sun. I think, many of these cards at certain points in time have been more powerful. Like we have cards like Walking Ballista, which at certain points in time, it's just the infinite mana payoff card you're looking for. Court of Calling, another card with infinite mana, can do some things.
I mean, Court of Calling and Eldritch Evolution are mainstays in Yawgmoth right now. Speaking of Ignoble Hierarch, speaking of Birds of Paradise.
And more playable than Collected Company today.
Right now, which is interesting because, those cards were coexisted for a long time and Collected Company was still the preferred choice for a minute.
Yes.
Through like Devoted Druid and stuff like that. But then we got, another card that's not on the list, Finale of Devastation, that does some work as well as far as tutoring up something that you want to have happen. Court of Calling, similar. Eldritch Evolution, similar.
And a card we have on here that if we argued about it for a while, we could probably get rid of, but it's Giver of Runes, a card that protects a lot of creature combo shenanigans, a card that could be in the Infect / Hammer portion if we really wanted to, and end up here simply because it really supports a lot of the broken creature stuff you're trying to do, because it makes your opponent have to have 2 removal spells to get rid of it.
All right, this next section is one that's very near and dear to my heart and really my development as a Modern player, especially in the early days of the format for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Spells Cards.
Spells Cards. It's really, is it Spells Cards?
Right. And it starts with Arclight Phoenix, which was the first truly good deck that I played in Modern that I was also not bad at.
This is also the card that sort of launched this podcast, as we've talked about many times.
That's true.
3 Phoenixes coming out of the graveyard. Dave, Stan, Shane.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah. And, Arclight Phoenix was often considered a thing in the ice deck.
Right.
Remember that smart take? It's actually more of a thing in the ice deck.
Well, yes. It was true to an extent that the deck was better when there were creature decks that you wanted to upheaval with Thing in the Ice or kill with Gut Shot.
Yes.
And things like that to get your free spells, get value out of those free spells. It got more difficult for Phoenix when the meta moved away from that kind of stuff, but it was still good.
Yeah, it got more difficult for Phoenix when they banned Faithless Looting as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, remember, there was that whole time period where Mono Red Phoenix was really the better deck, and I loved to play Mono Red Phoenix.
Those were good times.
That was fun.
That was fun.
It was.
And we had Grape Shot in that era because we needed free spells and Phyrexian mana.
So that's Gut Shot. We're talking Grape Shot so as a storm payoff here because we have rituals in this section as well.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. We talked about Gut Shot in the free spells era for a moment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Grape Shot.
Grape Shot.
Storm payoff.
Different way to go.
It still does one damage though.
It still does one damage, and it's actually in the new iteration of Storm, I guess. Underworld Breach is, I suppose, the new iteration of Storm in some way, in some strange way.
And strangely, it's on this list.
Yeah, strangely, it's also the last card on this list.
I should really cast that card once. I've never cast an Underworld Breach because I've never played a deck that has it in there.
Yeah. Yeah, you challenged me a few episodes ago to play Underworld Breach, and instead I built Hammer, even though I have this deck.
So I guess it's on me to do it again.
Yeah.
We also have the last 2 slots on here are Lava Dart is one of them.
One of my favorite cards. Made Prowess a thing, especially in an era where you could kill a bunch of 1/1s with it. It was fantastic.
Weirdly, has dropped off quite a bit.
Not as many 1/1s to kill anymore.
Yeah. I guess there's Ragavan.
There's Ragavan, yeah, but that's sort of it. And you don't want to waste the resources. And the prowess threats just aren't as good. They die too easily now.
Yeah, that's the real problem.
Yeah.
And a final 2-for-1, we've got Desperate Ritual and Pyretic Ritual because they do the same thing. I guess one of them has Arcane, which I still need to figure out how that works.
I've never done that. Never done it. I played Storm. I played Storm in paper a few times. I have a distinct memory of playing Storm with Shane in my basement one time where he was like, this deck is broken. Why does this exist? And it's like, well, it's not. It is annoying to play against, but it's really easy to beat, depending.
And Storm was my first Modern deck. It was the deck that got me into the format because MM17, not Modern Master 17, it was, Modern Master 17. Yeah, it reprinted Scalding Tarns, so I bought them, built Storm, and I hated myself for it.
And started a path to us hanging out more and
That's
leading
true.
to a podcast and all those kind of things.
Well, at least you had Scalding Tarn, Stan. The most important of the fetch lands for you.
My most played land.
By far.
By far.
Okay, so that's Spells. That was the stuff that's close to our heart.
Here's a mill card as a treat.
Exactly. Hi, mill players. You didn't think we'd forget about you. Here's your mill card. It's Archive Trap. That's the one that makes the top 200 in my opinion.
Yeah.
In all of our opinions.
Yeah, and the only reason to play mill is because you can play Archive Trap and your opponents have to fetch in fear
Exactly.
of getting milled.
Or you feel the ruin them and then they have to fetch something, which is a drag as well. But Archive Trap, there it is. That's your mill powerhouse. All right, so we're going to take another break here to drop in some more on-the-floor interviews from DreamHack Atlanta with players that we met talking about their favorite modern or non-modern cards. Just kind of whatever they were feeling. Stay with us.
All right, I am here with the one and only Cedric Phillips. Cedric, I have to ask, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
After thinking about this for a very long time, all of about 13 seconds, my answer still continues to be Figure of Destiny.
Can you tell me why?
It is the card I've won the most money with in this wonderful game, for starters. Second of all, I actually think it's a well-designed card, given the 3 modes and everything you can do with it, and there is a reason that they have made other designs similar to that, like Warden of the First Tree and Evolved Sleeper, because that design of a card is actually pretty elegant and fun.
All right, it's Dave here on the floor at DreamHack Atlanta. I'm here with Devin O'Donnell, Doomwake. We wanted to ask you, what's your favorite card, Devin?
Well, to the surprise of the listeners, Doomwake Giant. So this was a card that was this was the second Pro Tour I ever played in, and we did a lot of testing. And the nickname came from the card Doomwake Giant, and that's limited format, where I opened it in back-to-back drafts, 3 drafts in a row, and it was a really good card in limited. But yeah, that's my favorite card of all time. That's what I'm named for. So
that's a great card. I remember that standard format. I never played Obzon, so I hated that card so much because I was a Mardu guy.
Oh, yeah.
But, it was great. All right, thank you so much.
No worries.
All right, I'm here with the current world champion, Nathan Stoyer. And Nathan, inquiring minds want to know, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
So I would say my favorite Magic card has to be Rally the Ancestors, because once you resolve Rally the Ancestors, the game usually ends after a sequence of triggers and abilities, and it really messes up the board state to a degree that I find fun, chaotic fun, I would say. Yeah.
All right, I'm here with Skylar Warfield. And Sky, I have to ask, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
My favorite Magic the Gathering card is Liliana of the Veil, because have you seen her?
Oh, I've seen Lily.
Yeah, she's my favorite.
What is it about Lily that speaks to you, or do you have any specific anecdotes that capture why you love her so much?
When I started playing Magic, I was always kind of like a fair mid-range gamer, like Jun did Modern back in the day, and she, while being beautiful, was just kind of the play style I really liked in Modern for a while.
All right, I'm here with one of the people who made this all possible. DreamHack Atlanta has been incredible. William Huey Jensen, before we go for the weekend, I have to ask, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
I think my favorite is Tradewind Rider. It was basically the card. The first major competitive tournament I won was with a deck based around Tradewind Rider, so it's always had sort of a special place in my heart.
And what does that card do?
Okay, so it's 3 colorless and a blue for a 1/4 flying creature. Tap it and 2 other creatures you control to return target permanent to its owner's hand.
Sounds good. So this next section, these cards will never be good again.
We're coming in hot here.
and some of them hurt to admit.
Yeah. These
But
were some
it's the
great cards.
truth.
Some great cards that I like casting.
All right, let's start at the top of the list. Everybody pick their favorite card that... Well, we're not going to start at the top of the list. Everybody pick their favorite card that's never going to be good again.
Kitchen Finks.
Kitchen Fink. That's
Kitchen
the card
Finks.
you picked from this whole list of cards that we think are never going to be good again.
Yeah, that's my favorite one of them. It was a creature combo card and just a value mid-range card. I've cast it in both of those decks. It did some wild things, and now it will never be good again. It cost too much.
There you go. Stan?
Snapcaster Mage.
I know. I let you go so you could have that. I want you to know that.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
that. One of my favorite cards of all time.
Same.
just really pains me. And maybe we can trick ourselves into thinking that it could have an application one day because it is a 2-for-1 spell.
It's always a spicy one of. It's always a spicy fun of.
Yeah. It's in that Jace the Mind Sculptor territory now.
Right. Unfortunately, rarefied air of cards you can play as a one of. I think for me, given what Stan said, I'm going to pick Celestial Colonnade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you've definitely killed me with those a few times.
It's also a card that I acquired for like $5 a piece, and then they went up to being $50 or $60 a piece at one point in time, and then they went all the way back down to where they're worthless. Been on a real financial ride with those. Should have sold at the top, but I follow the Manguchi law of buy high and never sell.
Well, I have a funny little anecdote with Celestial Colonnade. Those stories about how like people who used to buy Papa John's pizzas with Bitcoin and they spent like millions of dollars on a pizza in today's terms. That was me in Celestial Colonnade, where like I had some Bitcoins that I needed to liquidate. So I found an LGS that took.
You've got to be kidding. Are you serious?
I mean, this wasn't like 15 years ago when it was 1 Bitcoin, but it was before I should have sold out a Bitcoin. I bought Celestial Colonnades for probably what's now like tens of thousands of dollars.
Several $100s per card.
It's several hundreds, yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. Here's the rest of this list. So get ready to fire up Twitter and come at us. Vendilion Click. RIP Vendilion Click. Brazen Borrower is better.
Not sorry.
I know you're not sorry. Wild Nicodle.
Yep.
People still trick themselves into putting this card into decks.
A 1-mana 3/3. We still think it's good. That was banned
Formerly
at the beginning of
banned.
Modern. Yeah, it's not good enough.
It should be rebanned because of just how unplayably bad it is.
I kind of agree with you on that. Here's a card that I've always hated that had a brief moment in Modern, but has never been good enough.
That Shane insisted we include in the list.
Yeah, this is
despite
Shane's
protests.
card.
It has to be on this list because Siege Rhino was so important to like a section of Modern's existence.
It was important to a really bad deck that a bunch of pros would not stop playing in 2016. I don't know about that. Siege Rhino. RIP.
It's got to be on the list.
Here's a spicy one.
This is spicy.
Young Pyromancer.
Yeah.
Never good enough for Modern again, I think.
Barely good enough for Pioneer.
I kind of agree with that take. I have never, like I said last week, I've never had good success with Young Pyromancer decks. But yeah, here it is. Young Pyromancer.
Here's an interesting one that was just, I think, outmoded by better cards from MH2, and that's Scavenging Ooze.
Outmoded by better cards from MH2 like Endurance?
Yeah.
I think that this was also outmoded by your pick from Streets of New Capenna.
The Lion Sash? But
no, Unlicensed Hearse.
Oh, Unlicensed
What do you
Hearse.
mean the Lion Sash?
Yeah.
Lion Sash.
Yeah. Unlicensed Hearse. That is a good one, yeah.
Also Fatal Push.
Called it.
Yeah, you did call it. Knight of the Reliquary.
Yeah, former powerhouse in a number of weird decks and value decks.
Was it actually a powerhouse? Because if so, that's way before my time.
It was a huge value card in like the 2012, 2013 era of Modern, a couple years after it started. Like this is what fair decks would try to do to make a giant threat and search up lands and stuff.
And then they printed Slowgurk.
Yeah.
Yes,
Slowgurk
exactly.
was just better.
That's one of my favorites, Lingering Souls, a card I've cast a huge number of times. This would maybe be what I should have picked over Kitchen Finks, honestly. But yeah, Lingering Souls, it's too expensive and too slow for too little.
I have 2 banned cards on the list here that I think will never be good. This first one's going to drive people insane.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Birthing Pod. I don't think we're ever going to get a chance to play it. I don't know if it would be that amazing either. It's in that same zone as Splinter Twin to me, where I'm like, why do this? Why bring it back? Just leave it alone. Let it be dead. It is what it is.
It'll never be good again because you're never going to get to play with it again.
Fair.
It's the
I think
safest
that's
way
true.
to put that without pitchforks.
Yeah, exactly. And then the second one is Punishing Fire.
Yeah.
I also think we're never going to get to play with it again, and it'll never be good again because of the fact we'll never get to play with it again. But I also think it's not powerful enough anymore.
It's really slow, right?
Yeah, it's just
really
so
slow.
annoying.
Yeah. And it would just destroy all creature decks. I get that. What creature decks are there in Modern? It's like Yawgmoth.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And then finally on this list, mopey, boring, Leonin Arbiter, part of Mono White Taxes.
Yeah. I love that card. I thought it was really fun. It's got the worst rules interactions you can imagine, especially on Magic Online.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
The
real
worst.
sad times.
Yeah. However, there's one more card on here that we didn't mention, and that is Celestial Colonnade's evil brother.
Oh, yes.
Raging Ravine.
Yeah, I mean, I was making the stance last night that it was the most powerful creature land ever. It just took over a game so quickly. It was so good and efficient and in a good deck of Jund, and now it's worthless.
Right, because now Jund also plays the only good creature land, which is Urza Saga.
Next section, since we just talked about cards that will never be good enough for Modern again, how about some cards that we can't believe are good enough for Modern right now?
Okay. So what are you thinking about there?
Well, one is Brazen Borrower, which we just said had outmoded Vendilion Click, but it turns out the utility is just too good, and being able to cast a flying flash 3/1 is good.
I've just never felt bad about casting any side of Brazen Borrower. It just always does exactly what I want it to do in a given game state.
I totally agree. It's just every time I read it, I'm like, I can't believe this is good enough to be here.
I mean, and importantly, I don't know if this card sees a lot of play besides Cascade decks, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think like a lot of like blue-based decks are running Borrower for value.
Spicy one of in Murktide, baby.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a good card that you look at it and you're like, I can't believe it's Modern playable, yet it is.
And lest we not forget, the Vendilion Click friend used to only be a spicy one of two in a lot of control decks.
Correct. It turns out that interacting with a permanent on the board is better than looking at your opponent's hand and taking one of their cards, potentially. Called it. You did call it. It's another one you called.
Okay, a card on this section that I can't believe is Modern playable is Shadow Spear.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, it does not seem like a Modern power level card. But I think the reason that this is playable is because a card we've mentioned a few times, which is Urza Saga.
Yeah.
So it makes it a tutorable value one of that protects your life, allows you to make your large creatures, especially your constructs, turn into just huge game-shifting, tempo-shifting cards. But yeah, it's just a card that you can bring in against aggressive decks. It's a card that just turns the tide in your favor and lets you close the door in ways that you wouldn't otherwise.
One of the newest cards on our list of 200 that fits into this section, Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah.
A card so innocuous that we didn't even really mention in the spoiler eps, I don't think.
Did not. And that was one of those immediately after the episode went up, we were like, oh no, what happened?
Yeah.
Read it again and we're like, oh, you get a creature and a treasure token probably, and you get to discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards. And then you get this weird creature that always dies.
Yeah. I think the lesson learned from that oversight was, I at least was focused too much on the backside being just worse than Kiki Jiki and not paying enough respect to the value that chapters 1 and 2 provided.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Similarly, Dress Down.
Dress Down.
Big miss.
Big miss on Dress Down. Weird card.
Hard to read.
Yes. Another card that was like, no thank you, sir.
Yes.
when that card was in front of me. Why would we care about creatures losing abilities and drawing a card and this thing sacrificing? It's just one of those things where every line of text means something again.
Sometimes vanilla creatures can be good or bad.
Right, or bad.
Yeah, or die or kill all of your constructs.
Yeah. Yep, totally agree. All right. That's our short list of things that we can't believe are Modern playable.
Here's our long list of cards that we hope are good when we bring them in for games 2 and 3 of a match.
This is the Hope These Work section. Let's just read them. Stan?
Yeah, I don't want to get in the weeds on any of these. Just they're all good sideboard cards.
No, we should probably spend 90 minutes talking about surgical extraction.
We did that already. I think that's episode 21.
Yeah.
How to surgical extract. All right, here's the list of sideboard cards that are weird to Modern, but important. Wear Tear, Surgical Extraction, Leyline of Sanctity, Leyline of the Void, Rest in Peace, Force of Vigor, Stony Silence, Pithing Needle, Relic of Progenitus, Engineered Explosives, Sanctifier Invec, Veil of Summer, Nature's Claim, and Unlicensed Hearse.
Stony Silence doesn't really see play anymore, not only because Affinity is not much of a deck, but Karn just does the thing.
Right. But someday, if we ever need it, it's there. The other thing is that a lot of these abilities that let you abuse artifacts now are mana abilities, and Stony Silence does not stop that.
That's also true.
But a lot of these cards are anti-graveyard hate, right? Some of them are anti-burn hate. Some of them are anti-artifact hate, but these are just all the cards that you need around as utility players in Modern. And it was a fast way for us to go through 13 cards in 2 minutes.
I mean, some of the most important cards in the format are in this list. Things like Engineered Explosives, which has gone for what? That was one of those weird cards that was like $4, then $25, and it's like $1 again, just because of like the vacillations of reprints and importance of the format.
Well, Urza being not as important is what took that away too.
There was this one weird period before even MH1 when Engineer Explosives spiked to $50.
Yeah.
And I did not understand why, but I let market forces compel me to buy it at its all-time high.
You're like, this
With
card
Bitcoin?
seems good.
Now with Bitcoin, with dollars I probably shouldn't have spent.
Yeah, well. But anyway, we love these cards. You're going to play with them. You know them all. Moving on.
Now for half an hour each.
Companions.
Companions.
WTF.
Yeah.
There's only two worth talking about.
Where's the friends?
Yeah, where's the friends? Your companions. Where's the friends?
Luris.
Yeah. Yorion.
Yeah.
Has any card blown up a format like Luris has?
Tybalt's Trickery.
We'll talk about that in a minute. I don't know, really. I mean, it made a huge... It's one of the worst cards ever made.
And it's an original design, especially.
Oh, yeah.
Luris' original design warped the entire format.
The entire game.
Yeah.
It was restrict. Was it banned in Vintage?
Banned in Vintage. Because you can't restrict a card that's only going to be a one of ever anyway.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable that card, that anybody was like, yeah, that's going to be good. Get it in there. I loved playing with it. And, we had Everett on at the time that they switched the companion rule. And he was like, you know what? Modern with companions, the original companions was fun for the 3 months that it existed like that. I kind of agree with that. I'm glad that they put it to an end. I wish that they had gone further later to get rid of Luris earlier and get rid of Yorion earlier and potentially just get rid of the rest of the companions. You guys know how I feel about this. They're just not good cards. But these are the two that made the list because they're the most important.
Yeah, I mean, Yorion, it's weird now to look back on the very recent banning and just be like, we all knew Yorion should go, but it's still almost the same deck and almost the same format.
I gotta say, I thought that was going to happen with Yorion. I was big on saying that everybody was like, 4-color's never going to work with a non-80 card deck mana base. And I was like, come on, doubt face.
But it's not that great, actually.
The mana or the deck?
The 4-color decks, I think, are less good without Yorion.
They're less good, but they're still plenty playable. Yes, they are.
They're playable.
Yeah, they're
control
still
strategies, but they're not necessarily even the best control strategies.
I think they're still the top tier of Modern, though. They're top 5 decks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some other cards that broke Modern.
Oh, yeah, this is a fun section.
This is our Oops, We Broke Modern section, going right after the Companions, which also sort of broke Modern. Number 1 card on this list. You know it. You love it. You maybe played it twice because this happened all over a summer when we were all at our beach houses.
That's right.
Hogak and Bridge from Below.
Did either of you play Hogak in that period?
I played it online.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think we tested it. I think we did an episode on Hogak.
We did. Right before it got banned. It was very, very soon. Because it was only around for 6 weeks, right? I mean, it was...
Well, it endured a ban and then got knocked out the second ban.
Yes, we tried with Bridge from Below, and then it made the deck better.
Yes. When it was a Crabvine deck or something.
But so I really liked Bridgevine. I was playing Bridgevine before all this, and it was a good deck.
Yeah.
And then they printed Hogak, and I didn't see that it was going to go in that deck, but then I was like, oh my gosh, Bridgevine is just a good, absurd deck now.
Is Bridge from Below the weirdest Magic card? That, I think it's the weirdest card because it's only a card in your graveyard.
Yeah.
Right? Effectively, it's nothing.
I mean, you can pitch it to Grief if it was to come back. That's the only other way it's a card, I guess. But
when you pitch cards to Grief, it exiles.
Right. No, I just mean that's the only other way you could get value out of it is to use it as a pitch card.
Or cycle it in your graveyard or something like that. But really, it's such a strange card. And I'm glad it doesn't exist because then you don't have to think about it and know how it works. But can we talk about, let's go back to Hogak really briefly because I think it's one of the biggest misses that most people have had. I remember when we talked about it, not that we're the final answer, but I remember
we should be though.
It was it could be a 1 or 2 of in Dredge, right?
Right.
And then it ends up being the entire core of a deck and half the format that you had to run main deck ley lines just to fight against, and eventually, of course, was one of the most bannable creatures of all time.
So bannable, you guys.
So bannable.
So bannable. Let's talk about another couple of cards that dominated Modern for a split second.
Yeah, I learned something really interesting about these couple of cards when we put them on the list.
Treasure Cruise / Dig Through Time.
Dig Through Time, highly played in Modern, right?
Never
Wrong.
played in Modern, really, because everybody just played Dig Through Time, and then when they Treasure Cruise, and then when they banned Treasure Cruise, they also banned Dig Through Time at the same time.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because there was a 3-month period or 2-month period after Khans of Tarkir came out where literally 50% of the Modern meta was people playing Is It Delver lists with Treasure Cruise, and there were things going on like Burn was splashing Treasure Cruise as a 4 of, because they would just fill their graveyard up and then draw 3 cards and reboot. Treasure Cruise, amazing card. I said earlier I was an Ancestral Recall person. Playing Treasure Cruise is one of my favorite things about Pioneer. The fact that we are able to do it in that format is awesome for now. But these cards broke Modern in a way that few things have in the past, and it was just via value, really.
I never got to play with Treasure Cruise in Modern. All I hear about is the stories of Delver somehow actually being good in the format for a while due to this card. But just the fact that we get to play it in a much less powered format with cards that do not fill the graveyard as efficiently in Pioneer, and Treasure Cruise still rules, and every time I've cast it in Phoenix or like a shortly lived Is It Prowess deck, it blows your mind how good it is.
Here's another mind-blowing card that's really good that would probably be good in a Rhinos deck. Oko the Trickster. The thirstiest Magic card of all.
Yeah. Is it Oko the Trickster? That's the 6-mana one, isn't it? Thief of Crowns?
Yeah, Thief of Crowns.
I thought we were talking about the 6-mana one.
Oh, sorry, Stan.
You got me. We're going to talk about another trickery in a minute. But yeah, Oko, Thief of Crowns, that card.
Seems good.
That was a card that Shane was like, Dave, you have to buy these. And then Shane bought 2 for me and mailed them to me and was like, you need these.
Really?
Oh.
Yes.
That's nice of me.
It was nice.
Then
It was a nice
banned.
Christmas present. And then it got banned immediately after. So I have 4 because I got my own 2 and you sent me 2. You're like, you have to have 4.
I mean, Oko, I'm so glad it's banned because it's just the most tedious value card.
Yeah.
In the end. And that's not the kind of magic. I mean, I understand. And I if you value those kind of games, I get it. But like, it's just like not the kind of Magic I want to play where I'm eking out maximum value over time. And that's what Oko did. Is it ground games to a halt. It removed text from creatures. It just invalidated so many strategies out there, and it became just Oko mirrors.
And it was one of the most broken cards ever that had a mechanic called Food on it. Food was one of the most broken mechanics ever.
Wasn't it like +1 make a food?
Yeah, that was the text. The text was +2.
Yeah, make a food.
+2 make a food.
Not make a food token. Make a food.
Yeah, create a food. Wasn't it +2? Oh,
yeah, I think you're right. I think it was. I think it was
+1
ridiculous.
was the elk.
Yeah. Yeah, +1 to the elk.
+1 to elk.
And then they had to get like Melissa Del Toro on stream to be like, yeah, we really pushed this one a little too far. Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
We never thought people would want an elk.
Yeah. Want a food and then an elk. All right, here's a card that really broke Modern for a split second.
Yeah, the fastest ban, I think.
Yeah, one of the fastest bans ever. It was like 17 days after the card came out. Tybalt's Trickery.
Talk about a vacation in the format. Let's Cascade for the next 2.5 weeks.
Exactly, and that's all it was. Cascade. I actually was super busy at work when this happened, and so I had 0 games of Modern logged for like 2 weeks because I was just doing the show, talking with you guys. We had just finished spoilers, and then I had a bunch of work stuff and I had to do. And when I came back up for air, we were like, oh, now we're talking about a banning. That's it. It's gone.
I hope that work stuff worked out for you, though.
I got a new job, so it did.
Mazel tov. Second Sunrise, a card I've heard about.
I recently was watching on the Will Hall Experience the Pro Tour with Second Sunrise.
Okay.
That the other Stanislav, Sivka, who you are not, by the way, not Stanislav. So Stanislav Sivka.
And I think if he keeps practicing one day, he can get to my level.
Yes. So yeah, Second Sunrise was just a really weird instant that allowed people to loop cards back out of their graveyard and just do infinite loops that would result in some kind of win. And it's one of the few cards that's like banned for play pattern reasons and not necessarily just overpowering reasons, because it just stunk. It was not it wasn't like a loop you could demonstrate and win off of. You just had to do the thing, and it took forever.
Yeah. You want to talk another card that led to loops and doing the thing? Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah, that's the one that I wish we could have back.
Yeah, we're never getting this card back.
We're never getting it back. But
it would make you play Cryptic Command again, though.
It might, or Deprive. But imagine this end step, fetch for Mystic Sanctuary, put Crashing Footfalls on top of your deck, Violent Outburst.
Why would you?
Because your Footfalls is in the graveyard.
Oh, because it's in the graveyard. Yeah. Or I mean, or go get Outburst and put it back on top of your graveyard.
Oh, even
That's
better.
the better one.
That's the better one.
That seems better to me.
Yeah,
Write
that seems
down.
better to me. Yeah. Never. I'm not going to bother writing it down because it's never going to happen. Another one that led to loops, kind of like Second Sunrise, KCI, Krark Clan. There are 2 R's in that. Krark Clan Ironworks.
Confession. I was playing Modern every week when KCI was a legal and broken deck. I was in the format, going to the LGS constantly, played in like SCG regionals that KCI won. Never once played against it.
Me too. Yeah.
I don't know how that's possible.
I mean, I think it's possible because it was like an enthusiast deck that people like felt a little scared to play, right? It's just like, it's very complicated. It has pieces that only this deck runs. I have to learn how it works. I have to learn how to maximize it. And so it was, a store like
Dice Dojo.
Yes, Dice Dojo. A store like Dice Dojo. You're going to have some KCI players, you think, but it's just that kind of deck that I think was not for everyone, but it eventually became so much of a thing to enough people that it had to be banned out of the format.
Was Eye of Ugin, another card on this list, one that was banned within a very short period of time?
No, very weird card. Because Eye of Ugin was actually in
It was around for a while.
It was in
That's what it
Zendikar,
was.
and it was around for a long time.
It was played in Tron.
And it was played in Tron to search stuff up.
Yes.
Right? So Eye of Ugin was there and kind of waiting to be broken because essentially it was a soul land, but there weren't that many. The only Eldrazi that were in the format really were huge ones or really small ones that didn't matter.
Yes.
And so when the new set came out, when Oath of the Gatewatch came out in 2016, and it had really good ones, and Thought Not Seer and Reality Smasher that we talked about earlier.
And the best one, Matter Shaper.
Not Matter Shaper, the
Mimic.
Eldrazi
That's
Mimic,
the one.
yes.
Was the
That's
one that
the one
really
that
went
broke
crazy because you could just play them for free. You could give them haste with a different card, and then boom, you could attack for like 20 damage on like turn 2. It was crazy, or turn 3, or whatever. I don't remember the combo off the top of my head anymore. But that was, everybody knew that there was going to be a lot of Eldrazi in that Pro Tour. People were trying all kinds of different ways to make them cheaper to cast and all those kind of things. And it was that deck that happened where it's just like, whoa. And this one coincided, of course, infamously with Splinter Twin being banned right before. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this broke Modern. And so they didn't ban the new cards, they banned the old card.
All right, so there's some cards that were so important that we named entire decks after them.
Right.
The Namesake cards. In some cases, they even introduced us to some new friends in the Modern community. You know what I'm talking about? All right,
no.
Well, let's start with Niv Mizzet Reborn, a card that we have to thank for introducing us to Cave Dan and the Faithless Brewing Crew.
True, that is true.
What Arclight Phoenix was to the Dive Down, Niv Mizzet Reborn was to Faithless Brewing.
You're totally right about that. Yeah, I forgot about that whole thing and the fact that I did a sleeve believe heave on one of Cave Dan's early lists and was like, I don't get it. Yeah. We're not doing this.
A take so bad that better Magic players had to form a hit Magic podcast to school us on it.
Exactly. Now, to be fair, the deck got a lot better after that once Teferi 3 came out, but
to be fair.
Yeah. Oh, no, that was all War of the Spark, so Teferi 3, whatever. Never mind.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. I didn't do it. Red and 6 is what made it better.
Yeah, and Astrolabe and Triumphs.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
I think Astrolabe was actually the card that made it better.
Yeah.
Other cards that fit into this bill, Yawgmoth, Thran Physician.
Mm-hmm. Urza, Lord High Artificer. That's a card that had a whole deck after it for a while, especially during the Oko era.
Yeah, we've got Hardened Scales on this list. It's no longer quite the powerhouse it once was, but I think it's always lurking, waiting to strike, doing things that involve math.
Yeah. Bring to Light, which often went hand in hand with Niv Mizzet, but also does its own thing when it comes to Scape Shift or other value plans, stuff like that.
And finally, Indomitable Creativity.
Yeah.
A new addition to this list.
A card that finally saw the price adjustment that
It's so deserved.
A wildly novel mythic in an under-opened set.
That was $5 for years.
Yeah, I mean, this card was hanging around for a long... I mean, yeah, Kaladesh was, 2018? Maybe? I think this is an Aether Revolt, even. So I think... Yeah, it might have been earlier.
2018 was like Ixalan.
Okay, so yeah.
Probably 2017.
Yeah. So there you go. That card was laying in wait for a long time until it had a good reanimation target. And then we talked about Yawgmoth. to a moment ago, but that's the one that's really creativity and Yawgmoth right now are really the class of Modern as far as these namesake cards go. There's not too many other cards like that. Omnath sort of is a namesake card, but really that's 4-color value pile. It's not really relying on the unique things that the cards do. These are unique cards that do unique things.
And Urza had its time in the sun, and I think Urza will probably be back when there's more really good, valuable artifact combos to go off in a blue Urza deck.
Totally agree.
All right, this a short 2-card section coming up. The vaguely unfair channel lands. We have the 2 good ones here, the 2 very good ones. We have Boseiju, Who Endures, and Otawara, the Soaring City. 2 staples of Modern. Just new staples, new staple lands that do things that frustrate your opponent and make you feel great because they cannot be countered and they have powerful effects and they can be played as lands. So who knew those would be good? Everybody.
The other 3, of course, are fine, but these are the really good ones, yeah. And then we have, just building off of that, a section of cool lands we didn't know where else to put. Ostensibly, we probably should have put Cavern of Souls in with the tribal cards now that I'm thinking about it. But really, this is the best of the cool lands. It's a card that's always going to be powerful in the format for people who want to cast certain types of creature spells. It fixes your deck in so many different ways. Keeps things from getting countered. It's just a good card. It's always going to be like $70 now or whatever it is, unfortunately.
And that's the part that breaks my heart because I would love to own a few, but I just don't want to spend the money on it.
Yeah, expensive. And then some really good utility lands. Bojuka Bog, Blast Zone, Dryad Arbor, all do really weird, cool things that when you need them to do it, and they have their uses in specific archetypes that need like holes plugged.
Yeah, that's interesting that Bojuka Bog and Blast Zone in particular, they're only in one deck each, but they're really good in those decks and kind of always scary when those decks find them on demand, which is what they're good at.
Exactly. And then the last thing here on the cool lands area, the Horizon lands.
Yes.
We only had 1 for a long time. Now we have 6.
Yes. And their stock went down a little bit in that we only see them in most cases as like a 1 of, maybe to a Fiery Islet.
There's some decks that run like Burn runs like the full play set of like the Boros one.
That's right.
Yeah, and like I've been monitoring them. Like some of them have crept up back in price just because they're just have such wide utility. They're just something that Modern wants, but didn't want as much as we thought they might.
Yeah, I think now that many people have access to them, we realize that they're really best in these aggro decks where you can afford to take damage off of your lands. You can't do that in every single deck.
Yeah, or in like Murktide where you play the Islet, where you play like a long game, where sometimes you just need to like cycle a land for a resource.
Yeah, for 1 card. Someday, though, when the Rakdos one is printed, when that happens, that's going to be a big card for Shadow, basically, or decks built around Grixis Shadow.
Or a blue-black one.
Yeah, allied ones.
Yeah.
So either one of those will I think, end up in that shell pretty easily. Because you were already experimenting with Peatland a little bit in that deck at different points in time.
So, my friends, we're reaching, somehow, the end of this list of 200 cards. We did it fairly efficiently. I'm impressed with us. But much like we finish off our opponents, finish off the top end of our curve, this is how we're ending this episode, with the biggest and baddest cards of Modern, Archon of Cruelty, Griselbrand, and finally, Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn.
Can we drop in some very epic music here? Bom, 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 bom.
Yeah, Carmina Burana.
Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, these are just the cards that you cheat into play.
Yeah.
That's what these are. And they do different things. They do game-breaking combos in the case of Griselbrand. They just clear the board in the case of Emrakul with a 15/15 flyer, or they provide massive value on a body in the case of Archon of Cruelty. But these are all cards that these are the cheat targets. These are the class of the cheat targets in Modern right now. We're leaving out what's the one that's in Elves? Sometimes
Greater Hoof Behemoth?
We're leaving off Behemoth. We're leaving off Progenitus.
There's that angel that used to replace Archon, and then people realized Archon is better. The angel that gives you protection from
Sarah's Emissary.
Yeah,
we're leaving Sarah's Emissary off. But these are the real class of the reanimation targets, and they're just the right level of epicness to end the show.
Forever. This will be the last episode of the Dive Down, at least until episode 200.
Go to our store.
All right, so we're done with the list. 200 episodes, 200 cards.
Name your favorite one.
Favorite show.
I mean, I think we really should, honestly thank everyone for sticking with us for 200 episodes. I'm not going to get overly emotional or in the weeds on this one, but, I can't believe we've done this.
Yeah.
I've loved doing all these episodes with all you all. I've loved interacting with all the listeners, and just building such a community around this has blown my mind. So, I mean, every time I meet someone new who's like, yeah, I love the podcast, I'm still just blown away by it. And I just can't believe that we've gotten to 200 without going, a little bit mental.
Yeah.
But
it hasn't cost us our marriages yet, or our homes yet, or our sanity yet.
That's
So
right.
that's good. So we'll keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's the wives. They love the money.
Yeah, all the podcast money that comes
the
in.
lucrative pod dollars.
Yeah. All right. So before we sign off for real, we're going to drop one more break of friends of the show naming their cards here, and we'll be right back.
All right, I'm here with the one and only Caleb Durward. And Caleb, I have to ask you, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
My favorite Magic the Gathering card in general?
Yeah.
I like that Rotting Register card. It's a fun one.
Why?
Play it, drop it, turn 1, murder somebody. Sweet. It's a 7/6 for 3 mana. What do you mean, why? It's pretty self-explanatory.
And now, what formats are you playing it in?
No, nothing right now, but I wish I was playing it in all of them.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying. You just play it and you attack 3 times. Well, it's simple magic. It's good, honest.
It doesn't even have evasion, though, and it makes you discard every turn.
Yeah, but I mean, lots of things make you discard. Chrome Mox makes you bin a card. Like, who cares?
And now, was it your favorite Magic card as soon as you saw it?
No, it took me a little bit. It took me a little bit to warm up to it. The first time I played it off of a Dark Ritual, I was like, no, I love this. Or maybe it was the first time I put an Embercleave on it. Oh, man.
And just like that, history was made.
All right, we are here with Chris Castor-Rappel, host of...
Good pronunciation.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard your name a lot, Chris.
Right.
So, what's your favorite Magic card?
It's got to be Arclight Phoenix at this point. It's just too clean, too good in Modern, too playable in Pioneer. I have 6'd a lot of on turn 2 in history, and I won't be able to do that anymore. But 6'ing people in general is really good.
Yeah, so is your second favorite card Faithless Looting then?
So Faithless Looting is too broken to be my favorite card, I think. I want something like a little reasonable, defensible as a Magic card, and I'm not sure that Faithless Looting qualifies.
CCR, thanks for being on yet again, and good luck with the rest of your RC.
All right, I'm here with the one and only Jim Davis. And Jim, I have to ask, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
Fact or fiction?
Blue instant, 3 in a blue.
I guess I gotta explain it, right? It's too old.
You don't even have to, but tell me why.
This is a subgame. It's what it does is it reveals top 5 cards. Your opponent puts them in piles, and you get the pile that you want. Or you put it in piles, and they choose the one. Wait, what the hell? They make so many different ones.
I think you make the piles and they choose.
Opponent makes the piles, you choose which one. Right, yeah, that's right. Opponent makes the piles and you choose. So you always get the card that you actually want. And then there's the mind games of you. There's the mind games of you play it in response to a spell, looking for a counterspell. You hit the counterspell and they put it in the small pile. You already have the counterspell. Always mind games and stuff, and it's a really fun card. It's very powerful. Goes to the graveyard. Fun little mind games. Card sweet.
I'm here with fellow Magic the Gathering podcaster Tannen Grace. I'm expecting excellent conversation and mic technique when I ask. Tannen, what's your favorite Magic the Gathering card?
I think the pressure's on now, right? Well, I think the obvious answer and the one everybody at home would expect is mostly right. That's Delver of Secrets.
Can you tell me why?
It's probably the card I owe the most money to over my career that I've done the most winning with as well. So it's the name of the deck that I'm most known for in Legacy as well, the Delver deck, and I've done the most playing with at high level events with. So getting to play Legacy on the Pro Tour is the highlight of my career. So absolutely love that format, love that deck. Probably my favorite card of all time.
All right, that wraps up this week's episode. We should thank our incredible editor who's been with us for, at this rate, more than 100 episodes.
Oh, yeah.
It's 180, I think.
Yeah, I think
he's
he
been
came
with
out
us.
around 30.
Okay.
30, 35.
Yeah.
Shout out Tanner Campbell, a good editor, makes us sound good.
Yeah.
Cleans up all the back noise.
And a great podcaster in his own right. Very successful podcast.
And as we learned a couple episodes ago, like a really good DJ who can drop in like sick, wet
True.
beats.
True.
And today we want to thank our engineer, Greg, from Meadowlark Audio Works.
Yeah, here in Atlanta.
Greg just waved.
He's been in the room. Can you believe he sat here through this whole thing to like monitor it? I thought for sure he was going to turn it on and be like, "See you guys, I'll be back in a little. Let me know. Ring a bell and I'll come back."
I want to walk the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks, Greg. I liked having an engineer. I like recording in the studio. We should do this
every
again
week.
sometime.
Let's do this every week.
Well, when we buy our private island, we'll bring Greg with us. I'm sure he'd be down.
Dive down aisle.
Yep.
We focus on snorkeling, weirdly.
But that does wrap up this week's show. Here's to another 200, however they may go. Whoa. If you haven't yet, surely you have by now. But if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. In fact, if you'd like to leave a question for a future episode, you can do so over at Twitter, as long as Twitter is around.
We'll see.
Twitter.com/thedivedown. We'll probably find our way over to whatever replaces Twitter in the next couple of weeks. You can also email us. That email is going to be around forever.
Email's good 40 years in. We're good with email. You can find us at thedivedown@gmail.com if you want to send an email.
Of course, if you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon over at patreon.com/thedivedown. Patreon.com/thedivedown is the way to get deck boxes. It's the way to get playmats, pins, stickers, and tokens. If you want to get other Dive Down swag, you can do that at thedivedown.com. Go directly to thedivedown.com/store.
Yeah, and I'm going to announce something here. We're going to share out, because this is coming out after Thanksgiving. So we're gonna put a coupon up for people to use on the store. Watch Twitter for it. We'll launch it on Twitter to give people a little bit of a deal for the first couple of buys on the store.
Yeah,
for the holiday season.
Yeah, get that family member who loves the Dive Down a sweet shirt.
Or tell that family member who doesn't know what to buy you to go there.
Yeah, tell them right now. We'll wait.
We'll wait.
Of course, shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring the Dive Down. If you sign up for a Mana Traders account using the promo code TheDiveDown15, all one word, you'll get 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. And also get some amazing shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, and more from Barrister and Man. Using the promo code TheDiveDown15, get 15% off your first order from Barrister and Man. And you can always save some money on paper cards over at Nerd Rage Gaming. Use promo code DIVE8 for 8% off your order from NRG. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and make 200 podcasts.